Welcome, Bastronauts. This is Teal's Bass Galaxy, an endless dimension of fishing legends and degenerates connecting through raw, real, in-person conversations and stories. No, this is not your average fishing podcast. There's no rules, there's no limits. 3, 2, 1, blast off. This podcast is intended for mature audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's been confirmed. Aliens from another planet have landed on Earth. Sources say there's been 2 confirmed landing points for these extraterrestrial beings. One being Japan, and also, unexpectedly, in Minnesota at Waypoint Angler Supply, a local tackle shop on Lake Minnetonka. With the ever-expanding universe, it's no surprise that there are other planets out there that also share our love for the sport of bass fishing. And to Earth's surprise, this latest visit came from extraterrestrial fishermen light years away and many innovations ahead when it comes to fishing equipment. Some hypothesize these beings came from the planet of Naboo, matching up with Mayan folklore dating back thousands of years with fishing equipment ahead of their time. It has been confirmed they left things never seen before by an Earth-born bass. Waypoint Angler Supply is the premier space station in the bass galaxy and has tackle that could previously only be found in Japan or the planet of Naboo. The Waypoint ship is full, but we don't know when the Bastronauts from Naboo will be back. So hurry in to Waypoint Angler Supply today and stock up on that Area 51 Planet of Naboo JDM good before your buddy is whooping that sweet ass of yours. Stop into their store on Lake Minnetonka or visit their website, waypointanglersupply.com. That's waypointanglersupply.com. Use the code GALAXY2403 to save 20% on your next tackle binge. The Bass Galaxy is also supported by Veselka Fishing and Customs, Supreme Lending, Dream Team, Lake Country Insurance Services, My Wedge Motor Support, just north of Memphis, Barbecue and Catering. Thank you. Well, thanks for having me out, Deano. I got to tell you, it was really cool watching you this year, and it's got to feel really good in a sport that's changed as much as it has, and to maybe wonder if you still had it with all these young guys coming on the scene and you taking down a big one on Gull this year.
Yeah.
I was super proud to see that, and I don't think there's anybody who wasn't just happy for you, man, and it had to feel extra special. So.
Well, it was a good one to win, no doubt about it. And I don't know that my confidence was shaken that much because I mean we had a pretty good year. Me and my brother won Team of the Year for the Denny's a couple years back, and we've won a few here and there. And I mean we're still competitive, but I mean it's hard to be consistently competitive.
Totally.
And I think one of the small accomplishments we had this year was we were actually 3rd for Team of the Year on Denny's this year. I fished with a new partner because my brother wasn't feeling well. But, I mean, that was a pretty good accomplishment against the hammers that are out there on Tonka nowadays. And to win one against these guys in the Champs Tour was really, really something special, because it's hard to win them things. I don't care. I mean, I've won, in excess of probably 80 tournaments in my career. And maybe more than that aren't even, I don't have trophies from, But that to win nowadays is a lot harder than it was years ago.
I can only imagine, and I guess you're a guy who's, to me, fishing's always changing, right? It's a sport where somebody's always trying to gain an edge. It's a competitive sport. Things progress, things get better, just like anything. But there's few guys, I think, that can say that they've held dominance or had that kind of success you have from this decade to this decade to this decade. Now we're in the 2020 it's 2024, baby.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm looking at plaques and trophies in here from the 80s, from the 90s. And I guess,
Yep. No, it's well, I mean, my dad was a good teacher, and I mean, he was super competitive, and I mean, he instilled that in us. And I mean, we were always looking for an edge, from, back in the day when we were fishing even walleye tournaments on Mille Lacs and didn't know where the hell we were, and my dad was the Cytex rep, and we had Loran C's on the boat. And I'm sure a lot of the kids out there don't even know what it is, but it was basically a towers that triangulated where you were with radio signals, and then you had to make the numbers match up to get back to the spots that you were on. And we actually had to go
in
down.
English? Can
Yes.
you do, so radio, so it was like a GPS.
Radio-based
GPS.
towers that sent signals, and it triangulated where you were off of the radio towers, and then the numbers. You only had numbers, so you could have to be like you were in the service or something out there on a
Morse
Navy
code.
boat. Yeah.
Beep, beep, beep.
And we didn't know how to run them very good, so we ended up going down to Florida because the saltwater guys were using them, and we learned how to run them then. And then, of course, GPS came along and made it a lot easier. But I mean, that was some of the stuff that we were kind of first with up in the area. My dad being the rep helped a lot.
Well, like I remember there's an old Navy guy who would come in, and when he taught me how to manually calculate prop slip, like with math and whatnot, and I'm just picturing Deano and Teddy in a boat.
Oh, it was
transferring these radio signals. And did you have to get a calculator? Like you have to
no,
write
it did
down?
it for no, it did it for you. I mean, it was a little box. It was like almost a little box like that, and it had like an LED printout screen.
Yep.
And it listed the numbers where you were and where you were going. Going
so
up.
You're matching numbers. Basically.
Yeah, you're trying to get the numbers to match up, and and it would
that
tell you to
makes
go.
sense.
It had a heading of a compass heading, so you had to have a compass on the boat because they didn't have them built in.
Okay.
So you had to have and it's you go 270 and you're going that way. You're going 180, you're going that way. It was like,
Right.
and then to get the numbers to line up, it was.
Well, I suppose you guys used the knowledge you had with lining up the banks, so it kind of allowed you.
Yeah.
It's not like you were, on one end of Tonka and like triangulating.
That technology didn't last that long though, because like I said, GPS came along and it made it a lot easier. And it's, nobody would appreciate it unless they actually had to deal with it, many years ago. And it's just something that we did. There's no different than. We knew the fish were biting up on a littler lake where they couldn't get the big bass boats in, and we'd show up with the John boat and a 50 horse and run up the creek and catch the fish and win the tournament, and nobody else had the boat, but there weren't rules against it,
So if we're talking 80s bass fishing tournament winning strategies, like finding a place somebody couldn't go to.
Well, depending on the lake. I mean, there were some
Right.
lakes that had it and some didn't. I mean, like the Clearwater chain, there was lakes you could get up on, that you could get through where nobody else could get in. And Gull Lake was another one. We went all the way up to the Cullen chain. And it was like an hour and a half to get there, an hour and a half to get back. You had a few hours to fish, but I mean, nobody was bothering the fish, and we just wailed on them and then come back and they go, "Where'd you get them?" Oh, we had a little spot.
Well, that's just badass. And you think about though, like when you're fishing's all about trying to figure out what everybody else isn't doing. And I think at that time it was, Lewis and Clark and something, or doing the offshore thing before, really anybody knew that was a thing. And to me, now it's almost like everybody's offshore and everybody can do it. But when I was growing up,
They didn't
it
even
wasn't
call it
easy.
offshore then. You were either fishing shallow or deep.
Sure.
And they
Fair
didn't.
enough.
Yeah, some guy didn't even know how to throw Texas rigs. Like I'm not very good with the worm type of stuff, and some of the stuff that we came up with, and I mean, we didn't invent it all, but I mean, we had friends and stuff. That one guy, the older guy that lived out on Minnetonka that my dad become friends with, was always out, off the edge and off the break line, and my dad, started talking to him before this guy was out there finding the rock piles that everybody's fishing now before anybody was looking for them. And we had a special jig that we had, and I don't have one. I have them over my dad's, but I don't have any here. But it was basically a version of a football head, kind of more of an archy style than the football heads. And we would just take that jig with the skirt on it, and like a Jean LaRue craw, and drag it along out, beyond the breaks. And Linders actually did an article about it back, I would think it would have been in about the 90s or whatever. And my dad was kind of hesitant to give it up, but we had already had it for quite a few years, and guys that were starting to figure it out. And
Sure.
and then with that, here's, there's the one of the original roller jigs that, the Jim Moyna roller jig with Pat Walker and all that. That's one of the originals. And we liked this one better because you could feel the rocks better.
Sure.
The sand jig, it was hard to tell if you were on the rocks or not. And
This one digs a little bit.
well, and it's got the grippers on it. And that was one of the things. And back then, we were catching 12 fish limits. It took, sometimes 40 pounds. You know what I mean?
How'd
Plus,
you keep all of them alive, or didn't you? Were they dead right
no,
most of the time?
No, the live wells were okay.
Sure.
But that's, they went from 12 to 10 to 8 to
Yep.
6. They just kept, because the fish,
When I started, it was 8 and 6 was more popular than 5, and now
Yeah, well, the way we fished the tournaments back then was, you'd go get your 12 fish,
Sure.
12 2-pounders, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you never know how tough it's going to be. It was a lot harder to catch 12 than it is 8.
totally.
So you'd go catch your 12, and then you'd go out, beyond the breaks with the sand jig and drag that around, and you catch a couple 5-pounders, you got a pretty good chance of winning. Catch 3, 4, 5-pounders, you're going to win.
So this started out as more of a kicker tool in those tournament situations,
Yes.
just because of the amount of fish. So
Exactly.
what was like the deal for getting a limit then? Was it a jig?
It was a jig worm
Yeah.
all the way. And they call it a Ned now, and that still kind of pisses me off.
Me too.
Because it's not a Ned, it's a jig worm, and
Damn
it's
jig worm.
it's a Larry Bolick deal from back in the day. My dad fished with Larry Bolick and Gary Lake, and the names for the guys that have been around a long time, they know all these names. Them guys were the jig worm guys, and they knew how to do it. And there was a trick to it. Conrad Peterson from Gopher, he was the one that invented it. Now everybody's got one, but Larry Bolick wanted it with the lighter wire hook because you were ripping it off the weeds a lot of times. You're throwing it, not like a Texas rig. You're throwing it where you would throw a Texas rig, but it would get hung up in the weeds, and then they'd rip it out of the weeds. And it wasn't like, they're ripping wiggle wards that he did later on. But this was just, you throw a jig worm on with a little 4-inch like culp or Producto, or I think we even got some of them.
Dude, this is like cool shit. Here.
Yeah, the little tiny Producto.
Yeah, so get a load of this age of that bag there. That is like, I think White Snake was using these for their cocaine back in the 80s or something. But yeah, it's like basically, so this was like, you were jig worming this.
Yeah.
And now to me, this looks like your standard drop shot worm, or like what it became. But drop shotting wasn't around till what, 90s? Late 90s?
Well, even later than that, really.
Cali, late 90s, 2000s for the rest of the world.
Well, and there's still guys ain't doing it.
Totally.
There's still guys ain't doing it. The walleye guys should be doing it.
Honestly.
And I know some of the good walleye guys are. And I actually.
You ever put a fathead on a drop shot? It's,
Dude,
it's
I'm
dumb.
I'll show you the trophies. But I got 3 trophies back there from fishing northern tournaments. That was on the 3M deal. My dad and brother, where they had the race car drivers and all that from 3M, and they had a big customer appreciation thing, and it was like a 40, 50 boat deal where we'd have, tournaments and stuff, and we just get them big red tails, and we'd do it with the wire, okay? Because we're fishing northerns, so we'd have the toothy critter wire, 1/2 ounce, 3/4 ounce drop shot, and put a big fathead on, or a big chub on it, and go out there and find them with the live scope. It was like crazy, man. It was a lot of fun. I won 3 of them, the walleye or the bass, northern tournaments, drop shot and minnows.
Talk about like how much more mystery a lake used to bring than it does now. Like when you're telling me like when it started, it's go beyond the abyss. It's like you're going out in the ocean or something, somewhere you're not supposed to be.
Well, and that's the spoon plug thing. Now, I never really did it. I know that, the Linders and my dad, a lot of people probably don't know that my dad was like one of the first salesmen ever for the Lindy rig. And he worked with Ron and Al back in the day, and they were best buddies forever. And he was with them. And Buck Perry's the guy that had this, and Ron and Al were always intrigued by the fact that you could catch them further out. And the Lindy rig worked great for that because you're out beyond.
Yep, presents that bait real nice.
Well, and basically the Lindy rig's just a Carolina rig made for walleyes.
Correct.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And it was, of course, became, world famous, for catching walleyes and stuff. And it this here deal came to finding fish out beyond where anybody else was. And the pictures that they showed of these guys trolling, these speed trolling with a short little rod out the side of the boat with their little green fish locator, trying to right on the edge. Yeah, just trying to get on the edge and digging that thing through the weeds. And I mean, they just caught them like crazy on that thing,
5-foot steel pole.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, I'm sure all that crap's on YouTube. I mean, it's just stuff that. But I grew up.
I doubt it.
I grew up through that, going through that stuff, and it's like there's always something that you could learn and move on, and now we're into the 2025s and
right. What came first though, like the Lindy rig or the Carolina rig?
The Carolina rig.
Okay.
Yeah, Al won a few Bassmasters himself in the 70s. Okay, and my dad was down there.
So crazy.
Down there with them, him and Al, and my dad actually was like Roland Martin's roommate back in the 80s.
Those are
fishing
cool stories.
Some of the stuff, and I mean, Al had won a few, and I mean, the guys from down south is, who the hell's this, guy from Minnesota kicking our butts and stuff, and I mean, and of course, Al was a big walleye guy too. I mean, he was a very famous, walleye guide up there, up in Marv Kep's and all that area, and so I mean, he not only didn't know how to catch the, the bass or the walleyes, but he could go down south and catch the bass.
Is it cooler looking back on this shit, or was it more cool at like looking back, like me not living it and just hearing about it, like? Man, you guys were on the cutting edge of my favorite sport.
Yeah,
and like looking back, it just seems beautiful.
I think it was cooler back then than it is now. I mean, you're hanging out with Al Linder and Roland Martin, and they're on TV, and I'm just some young kid, that's.
And it's the 80s.
Yeah, and and my dad, my dad was their buddy, but I was just cool just to be around them,
Oh yeah, man.
And and learn all the stuff. I mean, I got a story back in the day when Lindy first started. And there, before the culprits, there was the Lindy swipe worm, which was basically it just had a teardrop tail on it, and they'd pour them right up in Brainerd. And on the way up to the cabin, we had a cabin in Longville, and we'd be coming up, and my dad worked for them guys, so we'd stop in, and it was Nick Adams and Ron and Al and Zernoff and all them guys were there from time to time, and they'd have rejects on the swipe worms. So, and they'd give me a handful of them, or a bag full of them, and I'd take them. And the next Monday when I got to school, I'd bring them, sell them to the kids in school for like a quarter a piece or a dime a piece or whatever.
No way.
Oh yeah. And
you were selling plastic worms, hustling worms as a kid?
Fifth and sixth grade, I was selling worms in school, and the kids were fighting over them, and I'd run out of them, and then I'd have to get more every week or every 2 weeks when we'd go up through to the cabin, and then I was getting like gold and silver coins that the kids were taking. They wanted the worms so bad that they were taking them out of their parents' coins jars or whatever. And
man, you had this many kids in school that wanted that shit at the time. Because when I was in school, I'd been like, you guys want some worms? And be like, what the fuck are you doing? Times are different.
Oh yeah, no, they were all about it. I mean, I don't know what they want them to scare their girlfriends or scare their sisters or kids, or I don't know that they were using them for fishing. I think they were more using them for just as a toy, or it looked like a snake and they'd scare their mom or the dog or their kid or whatever.
Either way, to me, it's a good testament of kind of like your entrepreneurial spirit and kind of like your flesh and blood and who you are as a human. Like, and look at like that. You started out selling worms in 6th grade, and it's almost like you were destined to own a tackle store or something, but not to get off the train we were on. I guess in the 80s, you had a jig worm.
Yeah.
We're talking 80s jig worm.
Yeah.
Football jig was 90s? 80s.
I'd say 80s to 90s. I mean, I guess I don't know the timing when we were using it before it got popular. Okay, I mean, nobody knew about it, and but we were we were using it was more the round version of it, and when the football head came out, and Jim Moyna made it famous. That was probably in the mid 90s, to late 90s. I mean, I don't remember when the first FLW one was here that Moyna won, but I mean he had made it famous pretty much. The guys were using it out though. Gary Yamamoto was using it out, in Arizona and California, the hula grub on a head. And
Yep.
I mean, the bigger, football heads came into play because you
Came
can feel
from
the
Cali.
bottom better. Yeah.
Jim would tell you he learned it, I think, from California and
Yep.
brought it back here, kind of like if you were to grab a Japanese lure and take it to
Yeah.
a Minnesota lake just the fact that anglers are always thinking of ways to trick a bass, and that it goes back as far as it has, and we're still doing it, but at a much more crackhead level nowadays.
Well, and everybody wants to know what everybody else is doing too. I mean,
for sure.
I mean, we weren't the only guys catching fish on the football heads. I mean, Moina was one that, he had his little method of, I mean, from what I could tell, I mean, we were sitting out from the weed line throwing in, and he was sitting on the weed line throwing out.
Okay.
I mean, there was a little bit of that going on, and I mean, we kind of figured it out that, learned from what he was doing. And it was, because of the TV cameras and stuff. And I mean, a lot of that stuff, you figure it out on your own, but you also can learn a lot, and nowadays, Christ, I mean, with them jumping in your boat, I mean, I was like,
can't hide anything now,
no,
Deano.
yeah, no, they jump in your boat with the camera, and I mean, you can kind of do what you want, but I mean, it's good for that day, and the next day everybody else knows about it. So
Fuck, you might think you're hiding it, but with AI now, AI already knows how many times you farted this morning and what you ate for dinner last night based on whatever. So it's I like the idea of the days back then where you could actually keep a secret and actually exploit what your hard work had found and what you'd figured out and exploit that for a year or two, versus
jump ahead to 2018. Okay.
Yeah.
I won the boat, and it was,
oh, that's a heavy bastard.
and Fighter was watching. He was running the camera boat, and I was just going to town. And I mean, basically, all I had was a power shot.
Brick.
They called it power shot, but I mean, it was just a drop shot with the live scope, and coontail in 16, 17 feet of water, and every fish I could see, I could catch.
How heavy a weight? Like,
was-
we're talking power shot,
Yeah,
bait caster?
yeah. I was using a bait cast. It was only a 3/8 or a half, whatever, depending on, what bait, because I had switched up baits, and I was also, using a football head, a small football head, because you could see it fall good on the live scope, but it took longer. So I could catch them faster because it was all about catching them fast.
Efficiency.
Yeah.
Yep.
And, I mean, the technology's changed things, with that.
Was that the first tournament you won utilizing live scope like the whole day?
As far as I know, I was the first guy up here to ever do that.
And that is so crazy.
In
to me,
2018, I mean, because I had the stuff and I learned how to run it. And there was other guys running it, but I don't think they actually understood how powerful it was. And like I said, Fighter was there with the camera boat, and he knew about it.
Yep.
Because he'd been on the elite. I mean, it's not that long ago. I mean,
Right,
6, 7 years ago. But I
Yep,
mean,
yep.
it was still being in the sporting goods business and knowing everybody and the live scope and how to use it and all that. I mean, I learned real quick, and I mean, it was one of them deals where I was one of the first guys to do it up here successfly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that was kind of a cool deal. And I tried to keep it as quiet as I could, but I mean, everybody knew about, I don't know exactly what year it was that the first live scope came out, but, I mean, Scott Martin, he was with Garmin back in the day, and I mean, he came to them northern tournaments that I was talking about, and I mean, he was way ahead of the curve than I was, because he had been, doing it down there in, all them lakes that they use them, they were using them down south, and I jumped in his boat, and I went through setting by setting just to get it set up right. So it wasn't fuzzy and it wasn't blurry. And I mean, the first time you look at it, I mean, it's even like the first time if a guy's never looked at a 360 before, it's like, what the hell am I looking at here?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, even like, over the last tournament on Gull, the Bass Heads won just a couple weeks ago. I mean, Brad was in my boat, Liferman, and he had not seen the perspective when it was right, when it was looking right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And because he's got the Lowrance stuff and he doesn't use it in that mode. He's got forward only. He's got a 360 on his boat, and there's nothing wrong with the 360, but it's just a little bit slow and it's not quite as much. And it was like that technology is pretty cool, and it was like, Whoa.
That perspective is something that my buddy and I have been playing with the last 3 years or so, and I think it's just getting out how dangerous it is.
I know who your buddy is.
If you're talking about Dane,
yes,
he's got the Lowrance. My other buddy JP, he's the camera marketing guy for Intune Marine. He flies in the shadows. He's more just a buddy. Doesn't tournament fish much, but he's dangerous and he's out playing all the time. And I remember that perspective mode. I was.
It took a while. It takes a while to figure it out, though.
Once you have your picture dialed, though, it's more detailed than 360. You just have to be aware of depth.
Yep. Well, and I couldn't make heads or tails out of it for like a year. Okay. I mean, and like I said, I jumped in Scott Martin's boat at one of them, things up at the 3M deal.
With it.
Yeah. He showed me, what, and he uses a different color palette than I do or whatever, but it's like, you got to find your own, you got to, build your own trail as the way I look at it.
Color palettes are more, everybody's eyes are different, right?
But once Mike Anselmo,
good dude.
Yep, Mike. Mike's now with Untamed Tackle, but he was with Northland and he was with Garmin and Stryker, and I mean, and Mike's dad is Mike's dad, Mick, is a really good friend of mine. And I've known him forever, and I mean, he was instrumental in starting. A lot of the kids, if they haven't seen it, the younger kids, high school kids, and college guys or whatever. There is some stuff on YouTube on some of the old Silverado tournaments.
Oh, those are some of my favorites. Okay. And if you guys haven't checked them out, the old Silverado Pro-Ams on YouTube.
Well, Mick Anselmo, and Roger Moody. Roger Moody owned Friendly Chev, but he was also the president of the Heartland Chevrolet Association, and he got Chevrolet to Silverado to sponsor that. And that started, I think that was back in the 2000, probably 20 years ago.
Yep.
But I mean, all that. And Mick was K102, the radio station, and I mean they had the K-Fan tournament and all that. So Mike's dad's been in the business forever.
Totally.
And friends, and I mean, a matter of fact, he's got a cabin up by me. I was with him this weekend, and it just brings back a lot of cool memories of all the stuff that we did back in the day with them guys. But Mike.
I look up to Mike.
Getting back to Mike, he's a genius, and I mean he doesn't fish all the tournaments around here, but over in Wisconsin he
can catch them.
He wins 2, 3, 4, 5 a year with his partner over there. Because he lives in Hudson, but he was up at the cabin and he jumped in my boat with me, and showed me. I mean, we could see the sunfish, we could see the beds, and what a difference. Somebody that knows what they're doing, you get the picture and you could see it. And I was like, ding, the light went on. You know what I mean? And it was like, but it took somebody showing me the perspective to understand, the capabilities of it. And I mean, I use it quite a bit now.
Right. Well, it's been cool talking with Mike, and I switched over pretty much to a lot of his jigs, and that new breacher flipping jig, and we can get into this Gull Lake big win that you got. But I mean, I don't know if you flip that breacher jig around, but that is a bad little jig with the finesse skirt, compact.
Yeah. Nope. I know.
Happy for him, and I guess.
No, he's going to do good with that. That's really good.
Well, to me, owning a jig company sounds like a really challenging task, and you can probably speak to the fishing industry or business in itself of fishing tackle, and how seems like it's a tough business in a small world, but that's I'm always learning.
Well, I mean, it's kind of you're right. It's a tough pill to swallow when you got But Steve Hauge did it, with AT,
100%.
All terrain, and I mean he got bought up by a bigger company, and I mean maybe that's Mike's goal, or maybe Mike wants to just keep it going and keep growing it, and it's fun. It's fun to do. I mean, it's a lot of work, but it's still fun when you're in the business and going to the shows and seeing the people and selling your stuff and people telling you they like your stuff. And I mean, I've been fortunate enough to do that, with Shore Lunch and Aquaview and all the other companies we've had, throughout the years. I've been to a lot of shows, and it's always nice when people are telling you that they like your stuff and it's going in the right direction. So,
well, I'm a big fan of products that are really good products, right? And I think what's cool about the fishing industry is, well, you have true innovation or true products that are designed to build a better mousetrap, and I think American fishing tackle companies, the big business of fishing, has kind of lost that a little bit, and it's been cool to see with technology and the internet.
Hey guys, Aaron Teal here with Veselka Fishing and Customs here, and excited to talk to you about my new signature series rod, the Puppet Master. My number one confidence technique is by far offshore power finesse fishing, so we've spent a lot of time and a lot of years creating the perfect bottom contact power finesse rod, specifically designed to fish 3/8 to 3/4 ounce football jigs, tubes, swing heads, dragging a swim bait on the bottom, and any bait that you need to manipulate with your hand and land that fish. This rod is perfect for it. The big thing that we found that was an issue with other rods is they were either too crisp and sensitive, where they were too fast, or they weren't quite sensitive enough and they had the right action. So what Dane built with this rod is the most sensitive bottom contact rod I've ever held in my hands. But the big thing is, on a long cast, it's got the power to drive that hook home, but more importantly, it's got a parabolic action that's going to bend deep down in the rod to make sure that, let's say, football jig or goby tube isn't popping that smallmouth's mouth open and keeping that bait in the back of their head where it belongs, allowing you to have increased leverage and landing more bass. You're going to have to pry this rod from my cold dead hands. This is the Puppet Master. You can find it on veselkafishing.com or at Waypoint Angler Supply. Check them out.
Are you ready to reel in your next home purchase or refinance? Supreme Lending's Dream Team can help guide you through the entire mortgage process, from pre-qualification to closing. They have a wide variety of home loan programs in their tackle box, including down payment assistance and first-time homebuyer options. Just ask me. I trusted Aaron Daggis, a bass fisherman just like you and me, and Supreme Lending's Dream Team to help finance my first home. Contact Aaron Daggis and the Dream Team today by scanning the QR code or giving them a call at 763-326-0677. That's 763-326-0677. Did I catch a 7 in there? Or visit their website, aarondaggis.supremelending.com. That's AARONDAEGES.supremelending.com.
It's allowed for, I think, a lot of smaller tinkerers and to thrive and get, for me as an angler, get some products that are very niche or whatever. But I think what's beautiful about the sport is you've got like Dane building really technique specific rods, and that's kind of his angle on competing against the bigger rod companies is niche and specific, because that's what makes him different. I think the JDM market and how crazy that's gotten, and like with how Ross has capitalized on that at Waypoint, and it's not a matter of like, if he's all about numbers, then it's probably a big Strike King contract or whatever, if you will. But instead, he's kind of bringing in the cool shit and catering to very specific clientele. And I think that you really brought the foundation to that. And I think you guys were some of the first guys in Minnesota who were always really thinking forward. And it was, we all got to make a living, but it starts with a better mousetrap, right?
Oh, no doubt about it.
There's a few examples of that with a few of your buddies, and this wedge here, which this looks like the original prototype, but and shore lunch and you name it, man.
Well, I mean, here's a typical example of what Ross is doing. We were doing it back in the, I believe it was probably the early 2000s, 25 years ago. My dad was just so intrigued by, Byron Velvick winning 100 pounds, you know what I mean, with the swim bait that nobody had thrown before. And he went crazy and bought, I don't know how many thousands of dollars worth of them, and we started selling them in the store, and nobody bought them. It was freaking
really.
Oh, it was like the most ridiculous thing in the world. We had the coolest baits and stuff, and
nobody wanted them.
Well, the problem with them is, and these guys will tell you, I mean, if you don't throw it all day, you might only get 4 or 5 bites all day with it. You know
On
what
this
I mean?
deal, yeah.
You know what I mean? It's one of them things. And I mean, it's kind of like muskie fishing. It ain't nearly as much fun as bass fishing. Like, we had a good day. We seen one.
I just seen one today. And
it's like, well, I mean, that's the problem with that bait was. But I mean, in a lot of that Japanese stuff that Ross is bringing in, I would bet dollars to donuts, old term saying, that a lot of that stuff, them guys buy it, they try it a little bit, and they put it in their tackle box, and they don't use it. They buy the next one. You know what I mean? If you got to give everything that you buy a fair shake.
I think it's a ratio, right?
Yep.
And if you get good with the JDM market, you can get your ratio to 3 out of 5.
That work.
That work.
For you.
3
Yep.
of those out of 5. That's pretty good.
Yeah,
I mean,
but you got to try it. I mean, I'm all about it. I mean, you were looking through my stuff here. He says, "Why do you got
you're
that?
a dangerous man, Deano.
Why do you got that? Why do you got?" Well, because I'm on the edge of what happens. I mean, the reason that my store was successful while I had it was, we were always on the edge. I mean, and Ross worked there for a long time, so he understands it. I mean, my store's not there no more. So, I mean, he's the go-to guy now, and I think that's awesome for him. I mean, and I go out there all the time, and, anything I can do to help him, I will, because he's a great guy, and he's got all that new cool stuff there. And that's how we survived, we were the first G. Loomis dealer,
Yep.
Jim Spiker shows up with these rods. It was back when Series 1 rods were $89.99, and that was the nicest rod you could buy.
Yeah.
And they were the baddest ass ones, and if you had a boatload of them, you were cool. Okay? Well, Spikers comes along with these Loomis rods, and they're $200 a piece. I'm like, you ain't gonna be able to sell them. You know what I mean?
I just had an epiphany. Like, when you guys were on that cutting edge, right, and bringing in new swim baits, new stuff from California, that was such a tournament edge, but the internet didn't exist yet.
Yep.
So it was almost like you had all this shit to yourself, and
For a long time.
you wanted that market to be there, but the platform to get to the customer base, the market, you guys, all that tells me, Deano, is like you guys were ahead of your time, and people were way behind, man. And like, the reason Ross is able to pull that off today is because of the internet, because of there is no secrets anymore, so it's all about catching them. So it's all about gaining an edge.
Well, I mean, he went to college for that stuff too. You know what I mean? I mean, he actually, they teach you how to sell stuff on the internet. I mean, he's a computer genius, in my opinion, compared to what I know about it.
Ross is a tackle kingpin, and he'd be the first to tell you how much he looks up to you and how much of a mentor and big part of that you were. To me, the funny thing about you and Ross is in 6th grade, you were selling worms.
Yeah.
For Ross's college papers, it was a tackle store on Lake Minnetonka. Mm-hmm. When he helped his wife with her paper, it was selling tackle. Like, and to me, it's just funny how that works. And I guess it's almost prophecy, if you will. Well, it's almost prophecy, Deano.
I mean, I got a little behind the scenes story that Ross could probably tell you. Maybe he has, but he was trying to buy the store, before Waypoint. I mean, he wanted to buy my store, and I was willing to sell it to him. And the other guy came along, and he wanted to buy the building, and he wanted to, like buy everything. Well, I got a business broker involved, to find out what was really worth, because I was basically didn't think that anybody wanted to buy a retail store.
Sure.
And Ross and his dad, they did a bunch of due diligence, and they wanted to buy it. Well, the other guy came along and ended up with a way better offer for me. At the time, it seemed like a better offer because, and then Ross was still working there after I had sold it.
Sure.
For a while, and he says, I can't do this. He says, I'm watching the guy do what I wanted to do. And he had the guts to pull the pin on just working there and go and doing his own thing. And I mean, you got to take that jump. And I mean, he did, and look at where it's got him. I mean, in a short time, he's a go-to guy for a lot of people. And
Well, he learned from you with customer service, and he was the first to tell me that. And I think, there's no bad I don't think there's any bad blood with him and you there, and
Oh,
I
no,
think
I
he's
know. No,
just
I mean,
grateful. So
No, I mean, well, I talked to him about it. I was like,
Yeah.
I feel bad that, you didn't get the store. And he said, I understand. I would have did the same thing. I mean, the guy's going to buy the building, going to buy everything, and give you a big check down. And,
well, it's weird how like life works out, and it worked out for him.
Yep.
It's he maybe didn't see it right away, but I guess while we're on the subject, there is a lot of rumors going around with the store, and I think there's a lot of people wondering, and I don't know anything, but there's chatter around, and I guess would want to give you the opportunity to clear the air a little bit on I guess the status of Capras, and I guess
well, it's pretty simple. I mean, Sam, the guy that bought it, he didn't do everything that he should have to keep it running properly. And, the bank took it back. They foreclosed on it, and it's closed. I mean, the store's closed, and it was like in a year and a half. And I mean, I'm not going to throw Sam under the bus, but I mean, he just didn't do the right things that he should have. And a lot of stuff went, sideways. And basically, the store's closed, and the bank is not being real forthcoming on because there are guys that want to buy Capras and reboot it. I mean, I've got two different groups of guys that are interested. I mean, I don't think it'll come down to a bidding war, but I mean, right now they're just waiting on to go through the procedure of auctioning off the whatever inventory is there, and then if the bank is going to sell the building as it is, or if they're what they're going to leave in it. So there's quite a bit of stuff that's up in the air.
Sure.
But the guys that want to buy it, I mean, they'd like to come back as Capras, and I'd be glad to help them with what they need. I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to spend a lot of time there, but I certainly would be glad to help them and get get it started up again, because I mean it's far enough away from Ross, and I mean Thorne Brothers has a nice store right now, and they're doing a decent job. But I mean, there's room for us. I mean, when Thorne's came closer to us, years ago, it increased our sales. And
Interesting.
When Gander came in, everybody's, Gander's going to hurt us. No, we had the best year we had when both Ganders and Thorns were there at the same time. And
Interesting.
then Fleet Farm up on Lexington, they're going to hurt us. No, just there's more people in the area. I mean, the more people that come to buy the stuff, the busier, it's. So there's room in the market for a store there, and there's nobody up there that has guns. There's nobody that has archery. You know what I mean? There's a room for that store, and the specialty stuff. And I mean, I carried every color that Berkeley made and every color that Zoom made. And I mean, not everybody's doing that, and I mean, that, that's a big deal.
It is.
It is. And then you don't have to buy it online and wait for it, or, you can come in there and buy it. But I mean, I don't know where that's going to end up. I mean, if Capra's reboots, that'd be great. If it doesn't, it isn't going to change my life. People that know me and know the game, anybody that's in the business knows that I had nothing to do with the failure of it.
Right.
And I mean, I tried to give advice. I actually had a consulting agreement with them, but they never listened to anything I said. They had their own idea of what to do and how to do it, and it just didn't work out for them. So the new guy will probably take my advice, I would think, because I mean, I'd like to see it be back up there, because it did have the name on it, and it was kind of a legacy deal.
I was going to ask you that. Has that been hard for you since you let it go? I mean, it's hard to let go of something that you poured your life into that, and a lot to be proud of with it, but you got to let it go at some point too.
Well, I mean, I can talk about, the Aquaview. I mean, we owned that. We poured our life into that. We owned Shore Lunch. We poured our life into that. We sold them both, I mean, Aquaview isn't that popular anymore. Shore Lunch is rocking it pretty good because it's a big company that bought it. But so I mean, we just invented a lot of stuff, and it's all been good. And I mean, things change, and I'm not that heartbroken, that the store isn't there right now. If it comes back, it does. If it doesn't, I mean, they'll be remembering it just like they're remembering the Producto worms that they don't make no more.
Totally. Well, it won't be remembered in vain, Deano.
Yeah.
That's crazy, man. And so you still are kind of involved on a consulting basis with that then?
If if they get the building, yeah,
Sure.
I would be. But I mean, it just depends on which group gets the building and what they want to do with it. I mean, it's all about the location.
Yep.
Whether or not they get the building. And I mean, it's set up perfect. I mean, there's an archery range there. There's a gun shop. I mean, there's, a huge tackle area. I mean, there's a rigging area for electronics. I mean, people got to remember that the store wasn't there to begin with. It was Capra's Marine Electronics. My dad was the first Humminbird rep, ever in this area. And Humminbird, the fish locator that goes back to this little bait here, the guys with the fish locator and the green box, well, the problem with them was you had to have 2 or 3 of them because they were always in the shop. It was electronics and water, and it wasn't sealed. Well, here my dad goes down to the Minneapolis Sports Show back in it had to have been late 70s, early 80s. He's got a big aquarium with 2 Humminbird flashers running in water for the whole 10-day show. And everybody's like, I want one. I mean, so he sold thousands, tens of thousands of them. I mean, it was crazy. Everybody that had a boat that was dealing with the fish locator always breaking down wanted them. And they needed a place to repair them because they were down in Alabama, or was it Texonic, was in Eufaula, Alabama. And they didn't want to have to ship the stuff back and forth. So we started Capra's Marine Electronics on the store in Blaine there. And my brother and Harley Ogata, who incidentally Thorn Brothers was Ogata Thorn Custom Rods. Well, Harley was a Japanese guy that was really good at electronics, and he taught my brother how to repair the trolling motors. We were a Minn Kota Service Center and a Texonic Service Center. So we were repairing depth finders. Well, Holiday back in the day, which became Gander, and Burger Brothers, which is no longer around, but all the big stores had all this Humminbird stuff, and if they ever had one with a problem, well, just bring it up to Capra's. So we were fixing it, and all of our competitors, that would have soon to be competitors, were sending us customers. Well, we just took care of the customer. I mean, that's how.
And then they buy it from you.
And the Capra store didn't start till like 1986, the actual store. So for like 6 years there, it was just a repair shop for my dad selling the Humminbird stuff.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah.
It's weird how things evolve. And then how did, I guess, the tackle come into play then? Was it just, this shit's working? I came around in about 85 to help him. My brother was working with my dad. I was doing other things. And in about 85, 86, I came in and I had a lot of experience. I'd worked at Shock Electronics selling stereo equipment, Audio King. I also had another retail job where I was actually in high school. I was a manager of a store at a mall at like Ridgedale Mall. I was one of the managers in one of the stores there as a kid. So I mean, I had a lot of retail experience. And we had next to the repair shop there was a Trails End Bass Pro shop, and they actually had the Bass Pro logo and everything, and they were all lined up with Bass Pro. Well, that guy sold out to another guy. Guy bought Bass Pro. Well, he wasn't doing very good, wasn't paying the rent. So we ended up basically giving him, you got to move. You can't be here. You're not paying the rent. So we kicked him out, and we just started selling tackle. I mean, we had, and then we started selling guns. So we had guns, tackle, and then we moved into his space. We knocked the wall out, and then it just grew into the whole building. Shit.
So, and it was just, brought in some musky baits, brought in some this, brought in some that, and tried a little bit of this and that. I mean, I worked from, 9 in the morning till 8 at night every day for many, many years, just trying to keep things going, and brought in clothing and brought in,
right,
decoys that didn't sell. And I mean, it was just a big learning curve.
Well, there was so much to innovate, and there's so much to do at the time, right? Like, and there's probably only a few people who see it. Like, let's look at the transom saver, right? Before Mark came up with the My Wedge, were people even doing anything, or was it that trailer one, that bar?
Yeah, it's whatever came with the boat.
They come with transom saver, or like that lever thing that would come up and you trim the engine up, and then
that was like on the Evinrude. But I mean, back in the day, there was nothing like that. I mean, that made it simple. I mean, you had to bend over there and do it. So this was it was a really good innovative deal, and it makes it easy. You push the button, boop, when you're up and you're gone, and it works. And incidentally, that just recently, talking about the wedge, and I'm really good friends with Mark and Shane, and I mean, we fished tournaments together forever, and I'm really glad that they have something like this that they invented that's working for them real good. But I was on my way to the championship at Minnewaska like about a month ago, and I get rear-ended with towing my boat. I get rear-ended by some young gal. I swear to God, she was on the phone, and she smacked me right in the prop. Big dent in the prop, and the ear on the prop ended up breaking off shortly thereafter. And it hit the motor, but the wedge, if you look at that, it absorbed the shock, okay? And it cracked the actual white part of the wedge, but the big rubber part absorbed the shock to the point where it didn't break the motor mount or anything. And I truly believe that that's the reason that I didn't have as much damage, is just because that absorbed the shock of being rear-ended. Pretty cool deal.
Totally.
And if I'd have had just one of them little them aluminum bars or whatever,
shit.
It would have been all messed up. I'm sure it would have broke
More shit.
something than what it did. But this absorbed the shock, and I highly recommend them. I mean, it's easy to use, and it's good for the hydraulic system, and good deal.
Absolutely. Well, I've only been around since '93, so I don't even know when was the first dildo invented.
Yeah,
Because I feel like that was like
that was
like
Mark's,
you couldn't
that was Mark's influence.
We'll just drill a hole in this. Yeah, like the rubber, like to me, the dildo was the foundation for modern day transom saver. But to be honest, I haven't found a better mousetrap yet.
Nope.
If we're talking about things that withstand the test of time,
Yep.
this is still the best way to support your outboard when you're towing. So,
Yep.
And Minnesota company. So yeah, if people aren't yet, support Mark and get you something nice to support your outboard and cost you less money when
Somebody
some
rear-ends.
bitch rear ends you. Just
Yep.
kidding. She was probably a nice lady.
She was young.
Was she?
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't gonna guess it was a woman, but if you'd have made me guess.
Yeah. I told you.
And then the Aquaview, I mean, you've been part of a lot, and now you're seeing like the sport. I mean, it's not the same. It's a different world now. I mean, you're
The smart guys, though, got an Aquaview too, because there's a lot of stuff
Still.
you can see on the live scope and all that you don't know what it is. And I can tell a story about me and my brother-in-law. We're up at my cabin at Cross Lake, and he's got the live scopes on his boat and stuff, and we go walleye fishing because he likes to walleye fish, and I like to eat them. So you know what I mean.
they
It's
taste damn good.
a
Yeah.
damn shore lunch.
Put some
that
shore lunch on it.
So,
Yeah.
but it was, we were out and we could not make these things bite. And it was like, and we went back twice and we still couldn't make them bite. Finally, he, with his thought, he's like, God, I got that Aquaview. Let's drop it down. We drop it down. Here they were, suckers about the size of the walleyes that looked exactly like a walleye. And ever since then, whenever we see fish, if we can't catch them right away, we'll drop down the Aquaview and see what the hell they are.
Yeah, make sure you're not casting a carp.
Carp, suckers, whatever. And I mean, so that technology is still valid. It's cumbersome and it's not that easy to use. But there's some of them younger kids, they're pretty sneaky and they know and they use it. But I'm telling you, it's something that everybody should have an Aquaview if they really want to know what's down there.
I think that I'm glad you brought that up because I think all that's buzz around is live scope this, live scope that, and I guess I'm curious how many guys I've messed with an Aquaview and I've thought I would use it more, and I ended up having just issues with it and not wanting to spend the money to make it right or whatever. But I'm curious how much the Aquaviews help people kick my sweet ass over the last few years.
Well, I can tell you probably more than you think.
That's crazy.
And I mean, I'm guilty of it. I don't even have one in the boat right now. I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
I got used to doing, what you do. And I think that it's a little bit more valuable than what people think. And I mean, I'm guilty of it too. You just move on. And I think of Ron Linder, God rest his soul. He was a great great mentor and everything. And I spent a lot of time with Ron, and he was like, I just don't think that people are going to take the time to do it. And he's the one that, that said that, and he was one of our original partners in the Aquaview deal. And they bowed out because they had sold the In-Fisherman at that time when the Aquaview first came out, and they didn't want to be involved with the big, because there was other companies that had it, and Humminbird bought the Fisheye company, and Humminbird was going to rule the world with it, and then they found the same thing that we found, is that just the people don't take the time to use it.
Takes a serious guy.
Yep, you got to, but I mean, it's something. I mean, I don't have anything to do with it anymore, so I don't care if anybody buys them or not.
Yeah.
I mean, if people want to really learn stuff, I mean, you can really learn a lot. One thing that I really noticed my dad used it a lot, and you will find a lot of fish that are bass that just don't bite.
Really?
I mean, you'll see schools of fish, and it's like you can go back to them, and you just can't get them to bite. There's just some fish that them spots they're there to chill or whatever they do. They just go there. God, I lost my thought. What I was going to tell you about.
Oh, you're good. But I'm sure you learned a lot early on.
Learning. So we always thought a lot of the stuff, getting back to the sand jig that we were talking about an hour ago.
Yeah.
That turned into the football jig. A lot of that times what we were throwing at that we thought were rocks were actual bluegill beds out in, 14 to 18 feet of water.
Really?
They feel like rock, but
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
actual bluegill beds. And now with the 360, you can see them.
Yep,
But
yep.
back in the day, my dad was running around, with a big 1 pound weight, on a cord, that was taut, so you could feel for rocks. While the sand, when you hit the sand with the bluegill beds, the shells, it feels like rock.
Yep, yep.
Well, we were throwing at bluegill beds thinking we're dragging it through the rocks. So,
Crazy.
Yeah, and I mean, verified it, okay, with the Aquaview.
Yep.
Okay, way before the 360 and all that, where you could see all the little dots and stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So did you accidentally just keep running? Do you look for more of those then?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
See, that's badass.
And that's I mean, that's no different than shell beds down at Kentucky Lake or Linear, any of them places wherever they're fishing the shell
the river
beds.
here.
Yeah. Same. You know what I mean? It's just fish live where they live.
But to me, you're doing it. I mean, now people can run a bluegill bed pattern.
Yeah.
Easy, fast, a bunch of them.
Oh,
Fish
yeah.
50 bluegill beds in a day. Find them the day before.
Yep.
Back then,
It took
there
a
was
long
nobody fishing a bluegill bed pattern that they couldn't see with their eyes.
Well, and they didn't even
know?
know it. They didn't even know it.
Totally. And that to me is like, you guys, I mean, that's like some Christopher Columbus shit, Deano. Like,
Yeah, well, it's my dad was mad at that Aquaview, man. He used it so much. Oh God.
I feel like on Tonka, it could piss a guy off with how many bass swim around that lake and don't bite.
Oh yeah, I can think of a couple spots right now that I don't even go there anymore because they don't bite.
I don't know how you can stand it knowing there's 25 pounds on a spot and not try and sit there all day, catch 5 of them,
Yeah. Well, you probably have. If you had to, I don't know, you'd have to have live bait or something. I don't know. We couldn't get them to bite lots of times. I'm sure now with that, the new technology with the hover minnows and all that, I mean, obviously Jacob Wheeler figured it out, and them guys. I mean, they've been kicking everybody's ass for a couple of years doing it, and finally the word got out. Now it's no different than anything else.
Right.
There'll be another new minnow. There'll be something other than the minnow. There'll be something else, that comes along. I mean, first it was the drop shot. Now it's the minnow, and you can't catch one on a drop shot no more because everybody wore them out. And
Right. Isn't that crazy? And are you shaking a minnow now?
Yeah.
Oh, fuck. I know you are, but like,
what do you mean? You saw him you couldn't believe I had him.
I just think I want to get it on record because you told me how old you were, and I still can't believe you're 64. But like, you're 64 years old, and this is what makes you special. Is you are 64 years old and you were on the live scope train before pretty much everybody. You're shaking a minnow. You're probably the only 64-year-old that can look me in the eye and say, yeah, shake that fucker. You know, like that. I would say most 64-year-olds, 50-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 35-year-olds this sport yields a lot of stubbornness once you have success with something. It's hard to forget that doesn't matter anymore, or think that it might not, and go out and use your time to learn something new instead of try and make them do what you think you wanted them to do. And I think fishermen, all of us, myself included, fall victim to that, fishing insane and not being willing to do that. And I just wonder why. The only thing that makes sense to me is that you've always done that.
Do you trailer your big outboard? Then you need the MyWedge motor support. MyWedge keeps even the heaviest motors safe and secure on the trailer. And talk about easy. Up with the motor, on with the MyWedge, back down, ready to roll. And MyWedge is built to last. It won't rot, it won't split, it won't fail. Guaranteed. Pop on MyWedge centering clips for lateral stability and you're good to go. MyWedge, security in a snap. To order yours, go to mywedge.com.
Attention all Bastronauts. This podcast is supported by the Bass Galaxy's title sponsor, Waypoint Angler Supply, the Midwest's new landing pad for hardcore anglers just like you and me. If you're looking for the sneaky goods you can't find anywhere else, look no further. Waypoint Angler Supply has the largest offering of JDM tackle in the Midwest, and they are right here in Minnesota on Lake Minnetonka. This is truly a place every bass fisherman in Minnesota needs to visit because we finally have a tackle shop in the state that's as dreamy as the ones you find down south. And the staff at Waypoint Angler Supply understands the various needs of us anglers, which is why you'll find the selection there so enticing. Ross and the folks at Waypoint Angler Supply are passionate about carrying the right stuff, providing an authentic customer experience, and they listen to the anglers. And it doesn't end at JDM baits. They stock all the top U.S. brands, as well as local Minnesota brands like Veselka Fishing and Customs, Arsenal Fishing, Bait Lab Custom Swim Baits, All Terrain Tackle, Bagley Northland, Outcast Tackle, and more. So stop into their store on Lake Minnetonka or visit their website, waypointanglersupply.com. That's waypointanglersupply.com. In the month of October, use the code GALAXY2403 to save 20% on your next tackle binge.
Just a matter of, it seems like it happens so much faster now. So the fact that you're able to keep up like you are, man, just speaks volumes, I think, to you as an angler, and is a true something that I think anybody who wants to aspire to do this for as long as you have should hopefully listen closely to that. Cause
Well, I mean, you got to learn from your peers. You know, I'm not magical. I learn fast. You know.
Yep.
You get your ass kicked a couple of times. You want to know why, you know?
I'm with you on that.
You know what I mean? It's like, if you're getting punched, you got to learn how to block it.
I think that's a really good analogy. And
what did he say? Everybody's smart till they punch you in the face.
That's a great one.
What was that? The Mike Tyson. Yeah. Well,
but it's true, man.
You got to block that punch because they're coming. I mean, you just got to, and it's a competitive sport. I mean, that's what makes it fun. And I mean, this recent win was, just one of them things, man. Everything came together. And I think, as I think about it, I learned a lot about not running around. I'm kind of known as a run and gun guy.
Sure.
And it just, for whatever reason, it was one of them times where I knew that I had to stay on the spot. It was later in the day is when I really won the tournament, was by sticking with what I had going rather than go run to something else because they weren't biting every other cast. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And it was, and that's just stuff you learn in time. You know what I mean? It's, sometimes you sit too long, sometimes you don't.
What was going through your mind when you ultimately decided, I'm going to stay home and I'm going to grind this out, and you got Figgy climbing up your back on them docks, and you got I've been in the driver's seat on Gull.
I was
and
sitting
lost
right by
to Noah on docks.
I was right next to
And
you
I
out
guess
there on that spot. I was catching them right with you.
I had to leave.
Yep.
But I what was going through your head at that? Because I can relate with it, man.
Well,
and I've made the wrong decision there, or best decision I could. But.
Well, if they left out some stuff on the video.
Sure.
But I mean, I went to flip a 4.5 pounder in the boat, and it just opened its mouth and got off. And that was like ridiculously, like I ain't never gonna win one of these again. And I was just pissed that. I mean, it was like, why is this going on? Why?
Is this in the afternoon?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and I mean, it was like, and I knew that if I took off and went to run some docks, there'd be somebody there. They just ran through them, okay. And I knew that there was enough fish there. I thought, and I just caught one more and then caught one more, and then they quit biting on the one. So I had 2 different spots that I was catching them on.
Yep.
Back and forth, and I just kept running back and forth, and luckily I timed it perfectly when they restocked or they reset up and caught a few more, and I mean that just it was worked out good that way.
Did you notice, like I've noticed this more often over the years, that you can't sit as long, I feel like, as I used to be able to. Like, it's almost better to leave and come back and let them fire back up. It's almost like they hear the outboard leave and like, they need to hear that
if
leave.
You can, it depends on how many people are around you and how many people were fishing the spot. I knew that the spot neither one of the spots was that popular because there was nobody on them the whole day.
Yep.
Other than, I mean, Dane
was on one of them, I know.
He showed up and he was cool. I mean, he left.
That's what he said, yeah.
No, and I appreciated that. He did it, I mean, I told him I'd been there pretty much half the day, and I was like, I hadn't seen you all day. Where'd you come from?
He'd been saving that.
Yeah.
He was like, shit, I shouldn't have saved that.
Yeah. It just panned out.
Dude, what's going, so sticking it out like that, you were flipping, right?
I was doing everything.
Okay.
I mean, I'd flip, I'd throw a jig worm, I'd throw a weedless Cinco. I would just keep switching.
I think there's something to nowadays more than ever that definitely seems to be throwing them change-ups when you're dealing with schooling fish. It seems like change-ups are more relevant than they used to be. It seemed like you used to be able to bust a school on a jig worm and catch them all, or a lot of them. But power shot, and I think just getting into a little fishing talk, I guess I'm curious. I like power shotting, but I think there's a lot of ways you can do it, and I think I guess I'm curious because you've been doing it a lot longer than I think.
Sure, we'll talk about it.
So yeah, power shot. We had this drop shot thing come out, came from Japan to California or something like that, and kind of came on the scene, early mid 2000s. And I guess, how long have you been doing this power shotting thing? And I guess kind of starting at the beginning with that.
Well, I mean, it's funny you say power shotting because it reminds me of, okay, what really happened with the milfoil thing. Okay, and this here is show that's the original. I got one here, but that's just showing the name of it. This goes out like to Kurt Harrington, my buddy Kurt.
For her pleasure,
yeah,
the penetrator.
The penetrator jig. From that, they were from Texas.
Okay.
And it's there's the head of it, but that was like the original heavy jig for flipping the milfoil. That's the jig head that's on it. Now there's a lot of them that are like that now, and I don't even use that one anymore. I'm using some of Mike's stuff and some of the other stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, it come back to the old stuff, and you probably could use them, and it would be just fine to catch fish on them. But this here was what you had to use to get through the milfoil back in the day, and that was one of the things to have, was the right jig to do it, for flipping the foil, and they kind of got off the jig for a while there, and that the jig worm thing was like a lot better.
Yep.
Throwing the jig worm even in the milfoil. And everybody knows about it now, but I mean, it was like nobody was doing it, and Gunnar Meeson was one of the original guys that really was all about the power worm and throwing it in there, and they weren't using Cincos, or it was just a power worm.
Finesse, basically fishing something finessier and slower behind something power.
Yeah, but throwing it in the same spot.
Yep, totally.
Throwing that, where you were flipping stuff.
Yep.
And then they kind of got off the jig worm thing, for a while there, and the power shot was just getting it off the bottom, getting it where they were, but off the bottom. And a lot of times, up here it's hung up, and that would get down, and but it'd be suspended. So I mean, it was, and the fish every spot is different and they have different things. But I mean, it was just something that we started trying, and it would work. I mean, you could put just about anything on it. You could put a worm on it. You could put a creature bait. You could do whatever you wanted to drop it and have it up above, in the weeds. But
well, almost that it'll make your head spin. Like, what do you do?
Yeah.
Like, do you do 6-inch leader? Do you do a really long one and let the Senko really kind of fall with a Senko, a creature bait? I mean,
there's so much to it.
But you had to dial that in, I guess, and I'm curious how.
Well, I mean, when I really got good at it was when the live scope came out, because you knew exactly where the fish were.
Sure.
You know what I mean? It made it easier, and they'll follow it down, or sometimes they'll follow it up. I mean, it just every spot is different, and every situation's different, and lighting, and if the fish are up or down or whatever. But I mean, all that changes everything. But it's definitely a puzzle. I mean, it's hard to just figure it out. See, what they want.
And to me, I guess I wouldn't have guessed the live scope thing with the power shot as much, because of how I feel like a drop shot was designed to be a finesse, more open water presentation. And to me, the biggest advantage with the power shot is putting that presentation into places that people only used to think you put a jig, spinner bait, if you will. And I guess, is that what it were originally?
Well, that's how I used it. That's how I used it. It was fast. I mean, it gets back to that northern tournament stuff. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Well, we talked about trying to put a live minnow in front of the northerns. You know what I mean? You could see the fish down there.
Yep.
Okay, and I mean, if you put a jig head on it, it took too long to get there.
Yep.
I mean, they weren't like you were finessing them. They see the minnow, they eat it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And it was just a faster way of doing it, and it worked just as well for the bass thing.
To me, it's kind of like the way I fish a goby tube, if you will, is there's a reactionary aspect to it and a finesse. Like a goby tube, for example, it's got a fast spiral fall, but you can pull it and crawl it as fast or as slow as you want. That power shot to me is a faster fall, and then something really
just sits there.
But it's almost that same reactive nature, but yet you're still getting two types of strikes from that fish. I mean,
on the drop. Or
think
there.
about that, and it had to be so dangerous when you were doing that for the first time. Were you taking a jig worm, and is that how it started? Let's take this worm we were throwing on a jig head and put it on a wide gap hook above a Carolina rig weight?
I've done it pretty much every way.
Okay.
And it really depends. In dirty water, clean, it all depends on what you're dealing with.
For sure.
I mean, and trying to figure out what they're going to bite. You know what I mean? And I showed you some of them. I mean, I've got boxes of drop shot shit that you wouldn't even believe. I mean, I got 5 or 6 of them that are full of different baits and stuff to try. And they all look the same almost, but they're a little different.
But you got 3, I bet you have evolved 3 go-to baits that you're starting with in a general leader length range, probably 6 to 12 inches,
3/8 to half. Yeah.
Yep, 6 to 12 inch leader.
Yeah, I mean, pretty.
And then
it's just a drop shot with heavier line.
Totally, but I mean, I would reach for a bigger robo worm first. That's what I power shot. Okay. But that's me.
And I don't use the worm that much on there.
I'm curious about that.
I mean, I use more creature stuff and more fancier stuff. And it started back a long time ago. Even the more I think about it, it had to been. I think me and Severson won the Skeeter tournament when it was in more of a springtime one, and it was one day on Gull and one day on Leech.
Cool.
Or not Leech. One day on Gull, one day on Whitefish. And Jimmy had found some fish in the pencil reeds, and they were on beds. And I couldn't figure out how to finesse them out of the pencil reeds. So I had 20-pound line with the Texas rig hook with the drop shot. I mean, it had to have been 20 years ago or whatever. And we actually drop shotted them in the pencil reeds on beds.
Makes sense.
And
now.
Yeah. And I mean, that's how we caught them, some of them.
Yep.
And it was just, I mean, that's when I started doing it. You know, it was like, because it worked. I mean, it could get the bait off. You didn't have to be in, you know what I mean? It was just one of them things. I haven't used it much since then because there's not a whole lot of times where there's specific, you know, where they're in the pencil reed spawning where I can see them, you know.
Well, I would assume with a creature bait, power shotting it, I would assume you'd want a little more buoyant one, but maybe you want one with a little more weight to get kind of the
It
doesn't matter.
It don't matter because you can just hold it or not hold it.
True.
You know what I mean? It's just if it's dropping, it's dropping. I mean, it's just if you got it tighter, you drop it.
Right.
I mean, it's ain't no different than how you shake the minnow. You got to hold it or drop it. I mean, it's you know what I mean. It's all about
for sure. But like creature baits, talk about I mean, now there's billions of creature baits, but like a creature bait wasn't a sweet beaver like this innovative thing at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And creature baits, like when did Tommy Biffle? I remember flipping a sweet beaver. Before that, it was probably a brush hog. It was probably the first creature bait or one of them, right? But I remember
lizards.
creature bait to me. Oh well, lizards, of course.
I mean, we used to do lizards, you know. I mean, all the time. I mean, lizards on beds, you know. I don't think anybody throws lizards on beds anymore, except for down south.
Right.
You
I think
mean?
the lizard is very. I bet it works damn good because I bet no one.
Nobody's using them.
No.
No, we used to have. I mean, we used to carry like 30 colors of Zoom lizards back in the day. In two different sizes, and I mean everything. I mean, and they used to sell, and they were cheap. You know, they were like $3 for 20 of them. You know, versus now, Christ, you get you get 5 baits for like $5 on the creature baits. Some of them, you know.
I think there's some hidden magic in some of them old baits, and like it's just which one do you pick? But for me, I always try to at least go back to them a little bit, especially nowadays.
I don't even think I have a lizard in the garage here.
Really?
I mean,
you do somewhere. You just don't know where it is.
Well, no, but when we have our garage sale, when we had all the, the garage sales at the store and stuff, that kind of reminds me of something too that was super cool. One of my dad's deals was, he was good friends with Cotton Cordell, from Cotton Cordell Lures or whatever. And that takes us back to 3M, where my dad actually took Velcro with 3M, and he had them impregnated into a worm. Because the Velcro, the bass would grab the worm and it would get stuck in their teeth.
Oh my God.
So, and he sold that idea to, Cotton Cordell was one of his partners back in the day. And then Culprit Worms bought him and they called it the sticky worm. And
I had no idea.
That was one of the deals that they used for, it didn't catch on very good, but he sold the idea to people that didn't know how to Texas rig fish because it was always worming was harder than something else. So it made it stick. And then they actually had it where you could tape it on like a crankbait or whatever. And they did a little video on it. They put like a little Cotton Cordell, big O or whatever. Yep. And then they put the Velcro on the side of it and they'd cast out and they'd catch a fish with no hook. And they'd bring it up to the boat, and I mean, people. The video it didn't take off as good as they thought it would, but that was
it. That like Mike McClelland and I were talking about this. He had a spiral guided rod.
Okay.
That kind of took out the blank twist or whatever, and he made a point that I think is relevant. Like how many ideas that didn't take off then just because the internet and the market wasn't there, that just maybe those were some of those things might come out with. How many things got lost in time that you could apply today, because it's interesting how much innovation there was and nobody even I never knew about the spiral rod. I never knew about the Velcro bait, and it's like there was a deal to those, and it's just there wasn't a big enough market for them to really make it past the infancy stage. But I feel like you might be able to think, you probably could pull things out of your memory bank, because I haven't been around that long, dude. Internet, I did grow up before internet. Dial-up internet was, my flirting with girls started on dial-up internet on the old instant messenger. But, that Velcro thing is weird, and I'm just trying to think of other like actually like damn, that's a cool thing, and I didn't know that ever happened, and people forgot. I bet.
Yeah.
Well, the flying lure was more. You got gimmicks, right, that have been out, but man, when did the tube become like a thing, and then smallmouth weren't.
Bobby Garland. Bobby Garland was one of the original guys down at Lake Mead. I'm pretty sure is where it originally came from, as far as what I remember about it.
To me, that's the most underappreciated soft plastic that still catches them and always has, and I feel like
They use them for crappies. You don't even need a minnow. You just throw the little tube on there and catch crappies all the time.
that's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I love a tube, but a tube is such a simple like lure, but smallmouth, I think maybe this is more interesting to me, is the evolution of smallmouth bass and really what that's become. That's a full segment
Yep.
of bass fishing ingrained in everybody now, and it started as like the first smallmouth tournament most guys I've talked to fished was like some of them Silverados, going over to Wisconsin, like Long Lake.
Yep.
Mille Lacs was protected for the longest time, but like the river maybe. But smallmouth are, if we're looking at big picture bass fishing history, smallmouth are relatively new still. And look how big them bastards are and how old some of them fish are that are getting weighed.
I know. It's a learning curve. That's one of my favorite tournaments that we won was I fished with Jeremiah Johnson.
Oh, on Mille Lacs?
On Mille Lacs.
Yeah.
And it was like the week after Seth won the big Angler of the Year tournament. And he says, I'm saving some of them fish. I got a little local derby coming up that they wanted to win.
Seth said?
Yeah, Seth,
Yeah.
yeah. And he had 25 pounds and he would have won it, but we just got lucky. And me and my brother had done a bunch of practicing, and I ended up, fishing with Jeremiah Johnson, and we had found a couple of these spots that nobody had touched. And we caught like two almost 7-pounders.
Wow.
And we ended up with like 26 pounds. And that was like, and I mean, I wasn't known as a smallmouth guy by any means, you know what I mean? But I like it was, and we caught them on the football heads. I mean, we were actually catching them, dragging football heads in 20 feet of water. We weren't fishing boulders like Seth was. We actually had found fish that were,
on rock.
that were on gravel, you know what I mean?
Those are my favorite little things they take a while to find out there, but
When you do, there can be some good ones, and they're not getting bothered.
no one need a 3/4 ounce football jig and get to crack them. It's epic.
The walleye guys catch them. I mean, the walleye guys are the guys that find them because they're usually a little deeper.
Yep.
But it was, I mean, man, was getting back to talking about smallmouths. I mean, it's amazing. And I mean, I've been fortunate enough me and Jimmy Severson, I mean, he's one of my best friends and fishing partners. And I mean, we've had a lot of fun fishing together. And
That guy is, I mean, I look up to that. That dude is, you and him, that dude is a smallmouth pioneer, and I guess you've been a part of that, big part of that.
Oh, yeah. Well, he's taught me a lot about it. And I mean, he's a guy you want to fish with because he can tell you if there's a couple smallmouths under your car right now, he'll tell you.
The eyes on that dude. I always hear about his eyes and how good a sight fisherman he is, and I guess it's what we've learned about smallmouth since then is it's crazy how we're fishing for smallmouth now versus probably how it started then. What'd you have? 3 lures, a tube, a topwater, and a jerkbait? What did you throw for smallies like early on?
Well, I was all about the drop shot.
Yeah.
I mean,
right away.
Right away. And, I mean, that panned out pretty good. But, I mean, I was just thinking about when it first came around in, like, Woman Lake before it got pummeled.
Yeah.
But, I mean, these guys are talking about 25 and 26-pound bags out of Mille Lacs all the time, you know what I mean? And this was years ago. Me and Jimmy had 27.42 and got second place.
Are you talking that spring tournament?
Yep.
Yeah, we had 26 something for 6th or 4th.
Yeah.
Stupid.
And it was Brian Blazer, who was
Remember that.
Jimmy's
Old
other partner too, and he had 27.82. So I mean, there was two 27-pound, over 27-pound bags weighed in one tournament up there, and I mean, a lot of them fish are gone. I mean, I don't, they weighed them in the wrong time of year or whatever. That, I mean, it's
Well, 2022, Walls and Tuma, it was either 2021 or 2022 in August. Walls and Tuma weighed 2789 or something, almost 28-pound bag.
didn't they have some largemouths in them too, though? No.
Nope, all big brown ones. They had they had all big brown ones, and they lapped the field, dude.
I remember that too. Me and Jimmy one time took second.
Yeah.
And I think it was an 8-fish limit, and I'm going off of memory here, but I think we had like 32, and we came in second there, and the guys at Walls, I think it was either Walls and Tuma or Tuma and somebody, or whoever it was,
Yep.
they had 34 pounds, but they had largemouths too. I mean, they had,
I believe that. That must have been before.
that was, yeah, but I
This
mean,
was recent.
this was
Team
like
Trail.
8-fish limit or whatever
Right.
it was years ago.
Right.
But yeah, no, that smallmouth stuff's pretty cool. I mean, it's hard to beat it, and it's addicting. And I mean, they fight and they're mad. They've gotten a lot more finicky. It used to be a scene of smallmouth. You cast at them, he bite. You can
They're
catch 'em
conditional fish.
Yeah, you used to be able to catch them 2-3 times. I mean, everybody'd catch their fish and weigh them, and then go back to the bed and catch them the next day because they
Yep.
were. But now, it ain't that easy to catch them and weigh them and drop them back in and go catch them the next day.
No, they're smart bastards now in a lot of these lakes. I
Yep.
can't believe it. What's crazy to me is smallmouth are technically an invasive species, right? Like, what
I
smallmouth
don't-
aren't natural in lakes up here. Like,
Well, they came. I don't know exactly where they
Rivers.
came from. I mean, I'm sure they could. I mean, the Mississippi runs through Leech Lake.
Yep.
And Leech Lake runs to Little Boy Lake, and I mean, Little Boy Lake right now there's 7-pound smallmouths in it.
totally. And Little Boy, from the sounds of it, they were in Little Boy quite a bit before Leech
Yeah.
that people knew about. But do you think
Yeah.
they...
Well, I grew up on Little Boy, so I know all about them.
I mean, and you can run to Little Boy from Leech, so I feel like that's where
No,
the
you're talking Big Boy.
Big Boy, yeah.
No, I'm talking Little Boy south of Long.
Yeah.
But that you could get to Leech by there, but you'd have to do some portaging or whatever. You could get to Woman Lake from Little Boy.
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
you have to
I mean, you'd have to...
really work at it, but
Oh, yeah, you need to sock a Jawea for that.
yeah, no, that's kind of fun stuff. But
It is. And now, I mean, when the elite... Now it's a big part of professional fishing, I guess. And I'm trying to remember when smallmouth kind of really, like on a national level, gained
Well, we're-
significance. It kind of happened up here, obviously, before it kind of happened there. Now there's a northern swing every year, but it used to maybe they went up there, once a year. Champlain, I guess, is a pretty, a lake they've been doing it for quite a while.
well, I mean, they've had tournaments up on Champlain since. I mean, my dad and Al Linder
Yeah,
a
yeah.
long time ago went up there, and they called it Thousand Islands back then.
Really?
Yeah. And my dad and Al won some big 2-day tournament up there. Some couple guys from Minnesota went up there and they won it, but they won it on largemouths.
It's
and that
always
was-
been kind of one or the other on that lake.
Yeah, that was years ago, but
Well, now you got a scope in the abyss for them out there.
yeah, Jason.
Well, that's what's been interesting is like it used to be when we started talking tonight, right? It's you went up creek or went out deep. And this whole suspended fish thing, I know like Brad Leitner was an early tournament partner of yours, and I would say he's a guy who more so he would tell you that he kind of maybe fished for suspended fish early on when other people weren't doing it.
I agree. I was looking at a trophy on the wall there that brought back. I fished the Skeeter tournament with Brad, which was one day on gull and one day on whitefish, and we didn't win it. I think we got second or third, but he was throwing a chicken
Way before.
15 years ago, maybe.
15 years ago?
Yeah, before anybody,
Yeah,
I
no
mean-
one was doing it.
Yeah, and he caught fish on it in gull. You know what I mean? We're throwing it out there, just rolling it in, on the spot where I'd be wanting to throw a Carolina rig. He was, out off the edge.
Well, I mean, I think all that started for him, and you were, I mean, he fished with Teddy.
Oh yeah.
And like, to me, I came in late, where even when I came in, this was the dumbest swim bait at the time, but this was early on.
Yep. And that was
Storm Wild Eye Shad.
boy.
It's a stone cold killer.
Yeah. Oh, Bradley turned my dad onto that, and that came after the Rago deal. I mean, that was something. This had already went past.
This is tough to do at a depth that you were probably doing this, right?
Oh yeah, but my point is this was the first swim bait that we were selling.
Yeah.
It didn't sell, and then my dad was fishing with Brad, and fishing with both Brad and me. On and off, and that.
As anglers, we develop special bonds with our equipment. There's something magical when you find that perfect jig rod and reel combo for a technique that elevates your confidence on the water. Whether it's a perfectly balanced, crisp, and sensitive jig rod that gives you the highest level of control over your bait, allows you to feel every grain of sand, every bite, and allows you to drive that hook clean, or a rod with the perfect action and taper that seems to keep your chatterbait, swim bait, or whatever it is in the back of the bass's head where it belongs no matter where you throw it, or a rod that allows you to effortlessly cast a lighter bait you used to cuss at on your old combo. These types of magical bonds are rare to find in a mass-produced sweatshop, which is why Veselka Fishing and Customs came to existence, with the sole purpose of bringing you closer to your passion by enhancing the bond with you, your rod, and the bass. Confidence is everything in bass fishing, and there's no bigger boner buster than losing a big fish, not feeling like you can present your bait correctly. The list goes on and on. Mr. Veselka is a full-blown artesian craftsman who can build you the perfect rod, no matter the size or action, custom, exactly the way you want it. He also has a wide variety to choose from right on his website, including fan favorites like the 8-foot hair jig rod, the drop shot rod, swim bait rod, the chatter chicken rod, the MH workhorse, and more. Even ice fishing. You do the whole frozen Swiss cheese thing, the ice fishing. Seen grumpy old men? Well, you can send that jiggle stick back to the antique store because Mr. Veselka builds custom ice rods in all sizes and actions too. So head on over to his website, veselkafishing.com. That's VOCELKA fishing.com to enhance your confidence on the water, feel your passion, and catch more bass, baby.
Hey guys, Gaff with Waypoint English Supply here. Just wanted to highlight the fact that we have the big bass resource right here. Obviously, everybody in Minnesota knows about Kitex and the littler swim baits like these bait labs here. But we're here to have the big baits here in the store. We got Huddlestons, we've got the dangerous swim baits, the jointed claw glide baits, and the bull shooter glide baits. But it's not only the baits. We've got big rods, big reels, big line, and all that good stuff for you guys to go ahead and chase your biggest fish of your life. So swing on into Waypoint English Supply and get hooked up with the biggest tackle around.
They'd catch them on that where they were catching them with the Carolina rigs and rollers.
Do you feel like, was this always there, or do you think those fish were pressured from sea rigs and rollers so you needed to do something different, or was this always there for the taking?
It's hard to tell because,
Right.
I mean, and it was a Tonka deal pretty much. I mean, I didn't have a lot of success with it, on other lakes. And I think
Weird how that works.
Well, I think it had to do with the way the bluegills school up on Tonka, and that was kind of like when the bluegills were around, that's when that would work.
I believe that.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
It didn't work all the time. Believe me, that was that. I haven't tied one of them on in a long time, but I used to. But it almost like that there's so many things that cycle through, that work and then they don't work, and
Yep.
they get accustomed to it or whatever. And I believe the muskies had something to do with that bait working because they pushed the bait out of the weeds and the fish were suspended. And I think that had a lot to do with it.
That makes sense. I just have a lot of respect for a guy like figuring out a technique like this, because to me, when you're out in that depth zone with the electronics you had at the time, feeling bottom is your sometimes only thing keeping you casting, right? And now all of a sudden you're reeling this thing.
You have no idea where
and you have no idea where it is. You have no idea, and it takes a little bit of commitment with stuff like this too. So I have respect for guys who
what makes
put
the
that
commitment
time
a lot
in.
easier.
Getting a bite,
Get a couple bites.
Yeah.
You get a couple bites because when they hit that thing, it's like pop, pop, pop.
Oh,
then
it's a fun bite.
Yeah, pop, pop. I just love. Yeah, no, that's fun. I mean, even a chicken bite is.
Oh,
I mean,
it's
I'm
just like it.
Yep, I'm an anti-chicken guy. I'm the rooster.
Make Aaron Larson throw that.
Oh yeah, he's good at the chicken. There's no doubt about it. But I mean, it's like, it's one of them things where I just don't have the confidence in it. I throw it a lot and I catch fish on it, but it's not my go-to confidence bait. And it's kind of like that thing was the same way. You could catch some big ones on that, but I mean, it's like
You gotta throw the shit out of it. Yeah.
It's the same old thing as the big, it's like musky fishing. I mean, and if you're looking for 5-6 bites, maybe that's what you do. It's different for everybody. It depends on the lake too, but yeah, that old bait, that's.
Well, I think what's interesting to me is seeing you have a good amount of success on Tonka this year. I think the last time we recorded a podcast, you weren't speaking very highly of that lake, and I guess what's cool to me is you are Mr. Lake Minnetonka in my mind. There's very few people besides like Ted Capra, Dean Capra that have, and there's definitely, we'll forget names, I'm sure, but you've seen the evolution of Lake Minnetonka. And I think as far as like a guy who could communicate the different states and the evolution of Lake Minnetonka, I feel like you've probably got the best pulse on that because you've felt success in every phase of that evolution, even today. So like, talk to me about how much different and what you've learned about Lake Minnetonka, because it's been an evolution of learning for you, and it's constantly a humbling lake, but you've seemed to now have a good pulse on modern day.
Well, I mean,
Lake Minnetonka.
I mean, I got to give Aaron a lot of credit.
For sure.
I
That
mean,
dude's a hammer.
Yep. And when he spends his time out there, and I mean, then we fish good together. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Where there's no, I fish good with my brother too. I mean, just my brother wasn't up to it, up to fishing. And Aaron, I mean, he brings a new game to the, and I learned from him, and I'm sure he learned from me. I mean, it's just one of them things where you got to adapt. Thinking back, I mean, geez, it goes back. I mean, I've won tournaments throwing buzz baits. You know what I mean? On Minnetonka, I've won them under docks. I've won them throwing football heads out in 22 feet of water.
Crankbaits.
I've won them in
drop shot. Jig
I've won them in channels. You know what I mean? Years ago the channel thing was a big deal. Then now you can't even buy a fish in the channel. It's like, I don't know if it's the zeebs, the water's too clear. I mean, there's so much, it's changed so much. So as far as what my new pulse is now, is Aaron spends a bunch of time out there, and if his fish ain't going, we go to my fish, and if his fish aren't going, we go to, we've got, kind of the old and the young deal going, where he's got stuff that I haven't fished in a while. I mean, I don't think there's many spots out there that I haven't fished or been on, and I'm sure he'll tell you when we fish together, it's like I tell him stories about shit that he's like, he can't even believe, somebody caught him over there. It's kind of, anybody that fishes tournaments knows that you remember stuff from 20 years ago that you wouldn't remember about anything other than fishing.
That's what's fascinating to me about what we're talking about right now is the amount of memories you have. I don't know how I go out to a lake and fish a tournament that my brain, I feel like, would go nuts eventually, and you have to like figure out plucking the right ones or just like throwing it out the window and almost just taking the muscle memory from that.
Well, I mean, it really comes down to what's going on at the time and the weather, and trying to figure out how it's changed too.
Totally.
I mean, when you got to catch 6 4-pounders, okay, and you practice for 5 days, okay, busting your ass from, so I get out there at 5:30 early because I got to drive from here to there, which is not fun. And then I got to figure out how to get home. Okay. Because the Minnetonka for me is a long, you know what I mean? It's 50 miles.
From here, it's good ways.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, the traffic, and I mean, it's like, it just is what it is. But I mean, you spend 5 days out there fishing and you've caught 2 4-pounders that were legit 4s.
Yep.
Okay. And they're not in a school. And so you got, one fish spot here's and one fish spot there, I mean, and it's like, and you've practiced for 4 days and you got to catch 6 4-pounders. So it eliminates a lot of spots that you're going to fish because you're catching 2-pounders. You know what I mean? And it's hard right now. It's the hardest thing is trying to win a tournament on Tonka is hard to do because the game is up so much that the guys are catching 5 and 6 4-pounders at a tournament.
Yep. We've seen it this year.
Yeah.
We're starting to wonder if Tonka still had that. And this year, I think, has shown a lot of hope for that. But I guess the tough thing for me is with what you said is you catch a 4-pounder here and a 4-pounder here, and you catch a bunch of 2-pounders elsewhere. But you and I both know that 1 hour later, where you were catching that 2-pounder, you set the hook on a 4-pounder. And that's, I think, the struggle I have out there.
Well, and that's the whole game is the decisions and being in the right place at the right time. And it's never been any different, I know of tournaments where we've left the spot and the guys went in there and whacked them right after we left, and we've done it to other guys. I know Ravelings were the greatest at it.
Oh, they're so good at that.
I mean, they'd wait for the guy to leave, and I mean, he'd tell me. I mean, like I said, me and Shane and Mark, we fished a lot of tournaments together on Minnetonka. I mean, me and Shane had a real good run there for a couple of years where we run a whole bunch of them. And sometimes, they're famous for the wigglewort deal.
Oh yeah.
We got boxes of them.
I just think this box is sexy.
I told the story when me and Mark were fishing. I think it was the Tonka Classic or whatever, and Shane was fishing with my dad or I can't remember who was
Teddy,
fishing
I
with him.
think. He's fishing with Teddy.
Yeah, however it panned out, but Mark shows up and he's got one box, and it's all the wigglewort, and they're all the same color. I says, well, what are we doing today? So I think we're going to throw the wigglewort. But getting back to this, how they could pull in behind guys and whack them, it was the wigglewort would trigger them. You know what I mean? And them fish have become accustomed to that. It's hard to catch a bass on a wigglewort out there.
It's not a thing anymore. Well, talking to Mark, you just don't have the foil like you did in coontail. Like they had a deal with their setup, with the line, everything to rip and get through that grass. And coontail to me is more of like a grass and a boulder mixed together where you have to deflect off of it instead of being able to rip through it. So I think for how they were doing what they were doing, just the terrain and the lack of milfoil, I think is what he would say. But
well, I think they've become accustomed to it a little bit too much, the sound or whatever.
Genetic trauma.
Yeah, whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's not what it used to be, but I mean, that was getting back to how do you got to try to trigger a fish into biting. And that's the line there. You see that? That's the old Maxima. Look at that. Isn't that old school?
Dude,
the Maxima 10 pound. That's ripped off my dad's rod, I guarantee.
This was red line, wasn't it?
Well, brown.
Okay.
Maxima Chameleon, 10 pound. That was their
deal.
That was their jam. Yeah. Well, now with the fluorocarbon, it doesn't stretch as much, but that was some tough line. That stuff.
Well, what was crazy to me was 10 pound and lighter action rod, and I've learned this with a few grass ripping setups where I'll actually go to a lighter action rod and lighter line, and
cuts the weeds better.
It cuts the weeds, and that lighter rod doesn't dig the bait into, like, it's that balance of helping the bait deflect right. But I guess, do you think it was, so when you have a reaction tool like this, to me it kind of took the timing factor away from whether they wanted to bite or not. It was more react, so they could go behind anybody probably any time and catch them. Now it just seems like timing is such a factor on Minnetonka, and I don't know if you can hack that anymore.
Well, and who has the right bait, that's working. I mean, obviously when the guys, on that last tournament, Rob and
Joe.
Well, but I mean, Johnston came in and I mean, he must have did something different.
No, Johnston listened to. I know them boys, and I'm not gonna out what they were doing, but they figured out a little
something.
way they were catching them this year that was different than last year. So they had to completely change how they're fishing and finding little subtle, stupid stuff that big ones are on.
They did a good job at it.
Rob would have, and this isn't taking away anything from Johnston. I guess I just think Rob puts his time in there, and I guess he'd have had the same rod in his hand. And I think I got a lot of respect for Rob and Joe because I think they go about it the right way, and I think they're sneaky bastards.
Yeah.
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 And how they're catching them is gangster, and they weren't spinny poling them fish. I'll say that much.
Well, that's good. That's interesting. But yeah, getting back to, I mean, they figured out something that you can go behind them, or they're the only guys fishing the fish because it's, I mean, look at the Hangles too. I mean, they've got something figured out that's been working for them. You know,
I was gonna say that, like, for sure. They were leading. Did they win AOI? Didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. They were dominant this year.
Yeah. No, Tonka's like the reason I had such a down opinion of it is, I mean, we do our tournaments on Mondays, right?
Yep.
And every weekend there was either a high school tournament or a club tournament or a pickup tournament as they call them. Christ, I mean, you got 25, 30 boats. They're each putting in $20 and they're bringing 5 4-pounders to the weigh-in and dropping them in the parking lot. I mean, it was frustrating out there because the lake is such a great lake, but it just got so much pressure. And I spent a bunch of time out there myself just trying to find new stuff, And I mean, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you go to Fletcher's, there's 8, 9 guide boats all doing a corporate event.
Man.
So, I mean, it just gets the pressure like crazy. But yet, the last tournament of the year, they bring in 27 pounds or whatever for 6 fish. So they had to find something. The fish didn't leave. They just moved.
Well, that's got to be the hardest thing from your standpoint is you've got to watch everybody weigh all your fish over the last few years. And it's like with how much shit you have to run out there, it's like, at what point did you ever think you would need more shit to run? And then my issue on Tonka is it's like you can spend all day looking for something, maybe find it, maybe find one thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you can spend all day and not find nothing and run over to a community spot and catch a 4-pounder. So then you start to ask yourself, okay,
it's a tough game.
Am I in the twilight zone? Am I at the casino? Is this a slot machine, Dean Capra? Like,
speaking of casino, this is the way I look at it. I'll watch some of that poker on TV, and I swear to God, a pair of aces is the worst starting hand you can have, because they bust them aces all the time. And you got a good boat number and a good starting spot, and you go out and you fish and you don't get shit on your first spot or your second spot or your third spot. And you had a pair of aces to start. So now you got to, you know what I mean? You got to start over. I mean, the tournament game on Tonka is not easy, and it's just a matter of, not getting worked up and just going and fishing your stuff that, whatever worked in practice for you or whatever. And,
I feel like it used to take time and ability. Now I think to be as good as these guys are on Tonka, I think it takes being somewhat clinically insane, because you have to put enough time in on a lake that really ain't going to give it back to you unless you really put in, like, it requires more suffering to succeed.
My brother calls it the penalty box.
Right.
Yep.
And with all the good damn fishing we have in this state, it takes a truly clinically insane person to decide that, nope, I want to do this.
5 days on Tonka.
I want to go put my trolling motor in the water and maybe find one good spot that I could use in the Denny's at some point. 8 or 3 days, and we found. Took us 2 months. Like, I've heard it all. It's crazy. And it's going to change. Tomorrow they ain't going to be there, so where else are you going to go?
Well, and there's more to it than that. It's like, even like it was probably the last time we talked, I can't remember, but I mean, I had a spot that I knew that I could have really did good on. They were loaded in there. In the Monday tournament, Sunday, there's a greenhorn or something there, and I watched the guys load the fish right off the spot, and you know what I mean, they weighed 20 pounds or whatever for their 5 fish, and that was on Sunday, and the Monday tournament they weren't there, you know. But that happens on every lake. I mean, you can't whine about it, but it's one of them lakes where it gets the pressure, and it's hard to find a spot that somebody else hasn't found. And if you do, it's almost inevitable that you are going to be 400 yards away, and there's going to be a guy out of nowhere is going to drive right to where you just were and catch him. And you think he's seen you, but it isn't. He's just fishing the spot. Mm-hmm. Kind of happened to me on Gull just at the last tournament that I fished for the bass heads there. I had a spot where I had a 5-pounder and a 3.5, and 2 different methods, you know, like 30, 40 yards apart. I didn't want to burn the whatever. And that was on Wednesday. Friday, there was a guide boat sitting there running minnows, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Walleye fishing and everything. And we started on that spot on Gull. Never caught one. Went back 3 different times and never caught a fish on the spot.
What the?
So, I mean, it's like, it doesn't matter what lake you're on. I mean, tournament fishing's just that way. And you know, you got to, if you want to do it, you got to take the good with the bad.
Well, one of my kind of funnest memories on Tonka, and it's funny, I was talking to Andy Walls about this a couple weeks back, and just kind of going back down memory lane. I remember the tournament. I won one tournament on Tonka. I haven't fished a ton, but Dane and I won the team trail event. It was, I think, the day before the Blackfish. And
I know, I seen you guys.
And I'll never forget this. And I'll tell you kind of the epiphany Walls and I had, because you and Shane were fishing together, but I remember Dane and I roll up on our starting spot, and we're like, fuck, who is that? And we get closer, and it's like, oh shit, it's Capra. And I was like, well, I don't know if he's going to let us start here. He's got a tournament coming up, but you were really gracious about it. But it was like, I'm fishing my starting spot, and the guy who probably invented the spot
that would have won the Blackfish.
Just, you were sitting on top of it. I remember you were scoping it, and we're like, excuse me, Mr. Capra, we got a tournament. You mind if we fish here? And you're like, sure. And you just pulled over 50 yards and just got like scoped us. And I remember I've never been so nervous fishing a spot, because like I was being just spectated, right? But I didn't have like somebody's mom there. I had like Dean Capra, the guy who freaking, like, I was, as far as I knew, I was fishing in front of the president of Lake Minnetonka that morning.
Well,
and
it panned out. You guys won.
It did, right? We didn't end up, I remember it took me 5 casts to catch one. I'm like, the longest 5 casts of my life. I'm like, fucking here. Like, can I just catch one already? So he probably thinks we're hacks. We're doing, like, I was looking at Dane, I bet we're doing it wrong. And then I finally caught one. Probably still we're doing it wrong, because I think there's a heck of a lot more weight sitting there than what we caught.
Yeah.
But it's funny talking to Walls, their starting spot for that tournament, Shane was sitting on it in West Arm or whatever. And it's just funny to me that Walls and I experienced kind of the same thing that day in 2 different bays and had no idea of it.
Well, but we were trying to block our holes.
How much weight was sitting there? I mean, because we started there the next day, and you fished it right behind us. Me and Bankston started there.
Yeah.
And I don't know if either of us caught them there, but I think there was a lot sitting there. So I had a almost 5-pounder in practice the one day.
Yeah, I don't remember that particular one of where we caught them after it or whatever.
Right,
but,
right.
Yeah, no, that's the way it goes. It's fun though.
Well, like the bays in Tonka, what's cool about Tonka is how many the diversity of that lake, right? And I guess to me, it seems like the common thing is people winning out of certain bays, right? But you never really hear about some of them kind of east end. Like the east side of the lake to me is a side of the lake that you can go out and you can bust them one day. But it seems like it's really, the consistency factor to the lake is there. But what is up with the east side of Lake Minnetonka? And I guess, do you guys still mess with it?
Clear water.
Yeah.
It's the clear water. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I think it's got to do with the fish are still there. There is so much weeds and vegetation out to I mean, guys aren't used to fishing weeds in 28 feet of water.
Right.
Okay, and are the fish out there on the edge of it, or are they up in the weeds? Is there a hole in the weeds they're in, or are the rocks are covered up?
Totally.
Yeah, I mean the rocks are covered up.
It's Sea Rigville now.
So I mean, I really don't know. I haven't been able to figure it out. Okay, maybe maybe some of the guys are winning out there, but I don't see many boats fishing out there, even practicing anymore. I mean, you see a lot of the musky guys are out there running around looking for fish, suspended ones or whatever. But
I think the muskies move around a lot more on the east side too. It seems like I'll see a muskie more often.
I mean, it hasn't.
Spring Park and East.
I mean, it seems the fish got to be there. It's just there's so much more weeds and people haven't figured out where they are.
I've always wondered why the smallmouth haven't been more well exploited, because I'll catch like 4.5 like on a weed line randomly, or throw a crankbait down a channel, catch 2 3 3/4 back to back. It's like those matter. 3 3/4, 3.5 is a good fish on Tonka now.
I mean, it gets back to the old smallmouth thing of years past. You don't want to fish smallmouth during the tournaments because they're so unpredictable. You know what I mean? I mean, that was kind of we're fishing smallmouths. You know what I mean? You fish smallmouths on Tonka, they're not.
Well, you and Jimmy still did it on whitefish. You know what I mean? So they're and whitefish to me is a roamy ass smallmouth lake. So I mean, predictable, yes, not completely, but not completely unpredictable either.
Well, at least that's just my opinion of Tonka smallmouth. Okay, if they were on a point on the weeds or something, they ain't gonna be there. Chances of them being in there, I mean, it's almost like smallmouths on a wing dam in the river.
To me, I'd just be curious if there's more of a reservoir bait wind play with like shaking a minnow on. Like if a guy were to, I've always just wondered if you gave me 7 days on Tonka with scope, a jig head, and a minnow, and looking at wind, looking at bait, and fishing main lake suspended, kind of thinking that way. If a guy could put that together and actually weigh a top 3 bag, not during the spawn out there. It's just I haven't seen people do it, but I got to imagine somebody's thought about it or tried or.
Well, it gets back to Jacob Wheeler and them guys. They're doing it on other lakes. I don't know why you wouldn't do it here.
And
I know for a fact, and I'm not going to steal anybody's thunder, but I know for a fact I've talked to quite a few people recently that have been fishing walleyes and spent a fair amount of time fishing them and not catching them. And they talked to somebody else and they said, well, you're just doing it wrong. And they, what do you mean we're doing it wrong? Well, they're fishing suspended fish too. The walleye guys are, and a lot of so a lot of them guys they're, and they can use real minnows. They don't need to shake it. They can use a real minnow.
It shakes itself.
Yeah. So, I mean, they can, or whatever, but I mean, and when they changed, they started catching them. So, I mean, there's something to that.
Yep.
And it's just a matter of taking the time to do it. And you hit it on the head. You get stubborn in the way you do shit. You caught them throwing a jig worm, so you're going to throw a jig worm. Okay. Or you caught them throwing a crankbait, or you caught them, drop shot, and you're going to do what you have the most confidence in. And, it's kind of hard to break out of and it gets back to, me fishing with Aaron. I mean, we do different things. And I mean, they both work. It's just a matter of when they work. And some of that shit, you got to learn how to do it.
Yeah. Well, without outing like any of his stuff or time he's put in, but just speaking to fishing styles and working well with each other.
Oh, he's a weed guy. He's really good in the weeds. And
sure.
That goes back to my, the original penetrator.
Yep.
I mean, I've been doing it my whole life. I mean, he likes fishing weeds. I like fishing weeds. So, I mean,
yep.
We fish rocks too, but I mean, it's like we fish weeds.
Yep. So he's meticulous, and he's willing to flip till he finds it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And I mean, that happened on Gull last week. The guys that other than supposedly the guys that won caught him on docks, but I don't know that for sure. But I know that a lot of the people that I talk to that I know, got in the weeds, got dirty, got to get a little dirty when you're digging for gold.
That's awesome, man. I'm just wondering if you ever drank beer out of that.
No, That was 2003. I had a good year that year.
Yeah, what did you get?
I won a couple Angler of the Years.
Talk about a trophy.
Huh? That's
Like-
old school. Yeah, that was John Hesse. He had big trophies. That was good. I was lucky enough. Al Lindergay handed me that trophy. It was up at Vermilion when I won it, the Angler of the Year.
This one's got like character to it.
Oh yeah,
it's
it's
like
old
Stanley
school.
Cup feel.
Old school. Well, and this one here was the
So you won
Minnesota-
Angler of the Year 2 trails same year.
Well, this was the Silverado
Damn.
Pro-Am, and then that was the Gander Mountain one.
I'd be damned.
That's
proud of that one.
20 years ago. God dang.
That's 20 years ago. Look at this one, dude.
Huh?
Minnesota Pro-Am Team Bass Tournament, first place, Clearwater Chain, Saturday, July 25th, 1981, Annandale, Minnesota.
Heck
I grew
yeah.
up fishing Clearwater, man. That's like towards my stomping grounds,
Yep.
dude. This to me is one of the coolest pieces of history that I've seen. And was that like one of your first?
Most tournament anglers and guides are not covered fully or properly. Most insurance policies don't cover exposure due to tournaments and guiding. Taking the chance of using the wrong insurance gives the insurance company an out when settling a claim. How will the insurance company know that you're fishing tournaments or guiding? Well, social media is their number one resource. And guess what? They use it. Lake Country Insurance offers one of the only products that can cover both tournament and guiding use in your vessel. Anglers don't seem to hesitate spending $50,000 to $100,000 for a boat. Why risk that large asset all because you wanted to save a few extra shekels? Are you nuts? Call the folks at Lake Country Insurance today and make sure you have the proper coverage for your boat before the unexpected happens. Call 612-285-3113 today or visit their website lcisagency.com. That's lcisagency.com. Teal's Bass Galaxy is now offering intergalactic merchandise. That's right, we got apparel now, baby. Check out our website. We got a variety of apparel, hats, bucket hats, sweatshirts, t-shirts, all the finest goods. So stop on our website, tealsbassgalaxy.com, click on the apparel tab, and start looking good, baby.
And that's so far back that I don't know if it was my trophy or my brother's trophy. I know it was. I mean, we both fished with my dad on and off. It could have been me and my brother fishing, for all you know. And it could have been one of them ones where we went, I don't remember it, but it could have been one of them ones where we took the John boat and went up into the little lakes up in Clearwater when nobody else did. I mean, because it's kind of one of them things where that has happened.
Well, I'm looking at it here. This is Minnesota Pro-Am Team Bass Tournament. Minnesota Pro-Am Bass Tour. 81 Minnesota Pro-Am. 2003 Minnesota Pro-Am. That's got to be one of the longer lasting, unless that's different.
No, that's just what
guys.
they called it. That was like Carl Hostler back in the day, the Minnesota Pro-Ams. That was the original deal. The Silverado Pro-Am was a true Pro-Am. Okay, they just called it that because they thought it was cool.
Sure.
Okay, the Pro-Am. This here was you fished with
the name.
a pro and had an amateur in the boat.
Yep,
That's
the one
that you got paired up with. That deal there was just the name of the deal, and it was actually like Mike Gerber and Carl Hostler and back in the day.
How many boats showed up to like a tournament like this?
50 or 60.
No way.
Oh yeah.
In 81,
Oh yeah.
That's what's crazy to me, dude, is how much participation there was at the time.
Look at there's one back there. There's some more of them old Pro-Am ones. I don't know the years on them or whatever, but that's
Minnesota Pro-Am, Lake Minnetonka, 1985. Sponsored by Ranger Boats. 1984, first place, Lake Minnetonka, Minnesota Pro-Am. Like, this is just crazy to me. Ranger logo looks the same.
yeah. That's. I mean, they got re-sponsored. You know what I mean? It's like
Yep.
when new guy bought it, or I think John Hesse might have been running that at the time.
Sure.
You know, John Hesse was,
Legend.
yeah, he was great, and he was after he ran the Silverado ones for a while, and then he also ran the Shelbys. That's one of the Shelby deals.
That was a prestigious one, and kind of that's how Leiferman got his
Oh yeah.
his name, right?
Yeah, Brad won a couple. I was lucky enough to win the last one. They didn't call it the Shelby then, but it was still the U.S. Invitational. That was the
That thing is sweet.
Don Shelby
1997.
took his name off of it, and Frank Pillsbury took over it, and they called it the Bass Blitz.
Sure.
And that was my dad took second in that one, and they gave us, we each won a champion boat.
That's crazy.
And I got 30 grand in a champion, and I sold it for like 25 grand the champion.
30 grand plus a champion?
Yeah. Yeah, that was, well, I mean, it was 50 grand. When Brad won it, he won 250 grands in a row. This one, they kept the prize money at 50 grand, but I got a check for 30 in a boat that was worth actually more than 20, so.
I mean, how much is 30 now? Like, that's more like winning, what, 60 now?
Yeah.
Like,
well,
eggs were, what, $1 then? They're 5 now.
Well, I mean, there is no tournament. There is no $50,000 tournaments in the state other than the year-end tournament of Scott's, which, you know,
Yep.
you know, and that's a whole different
Thank
format.
God we have that, but why? Why? Because we have, the market's bigger now than it was. There's more participation now than there was. Yet, like, that just doesn't make sense, Dean. That's all.
Well, and it's got a lot to do with the accountability of the money of the sponsors. You know what I mean? It used to be, I mean, we had a TV show for like 20 some years.
Sure.
You know, where we were getting sponsored by Ranger and when Evinrude at the time. And I mean, we got Merck now, you know, but I mean, and Chevrolet and all these sponsors. And I mean, they gave huge amounts of money. I mean, 25 grand, you know, per sponsor. I mean, Northland Tackle was, I mean, all these huge, Rapala, and I mean, they gave us all this money to do these TV shows, and they gave all that money to these tournaments, and it was sponsorship money, but it wasn't as accountable as it is right now. Now, if you go to get a sponsorship for $4 grand out of Mercury, you almost got to tell them how many hours you're going to work
Yeah,
in a
that
day.
makes sense.
You know what I mean? Because back then it was like, well, sponsor money was just free money. You know what I mean?
Yep,
It was
yep.
like, and the companies weren't as accountable. And that's why they had that kind of prize money. You know, Ranger Boats was giving out boats like they were nothing, and, you know,
Right.
stuff like that. And nowadays it's just everything's become so much more accountable that the money isn't there, you know, to give away.
Yep.
I mean, the accountants got involved and made, listen, this is a business. We're not giving all this money away. Sponsorships are worth something, but they're not, we can't, you know, every tournament can't be a $50,000 tournament.
Well, it seems like, I mean, if you look at it big picture, the investment paid off from those sponsors in the long run.
Oh, yeah,
But
'cause
it
it's
probably
big.
didn't.
Pay off to them.
Correct. But as far as like it paying off for somebody,
Yeah, lessons in marketing. You know?
look at the sport now, look
Yeah.
at the sport then. It couldn't be where it's at now without
brand
that
building.
then.
Yeah, they built the brand of tournament fishing that they didn't well, Rangers
They didn't get to
reaping-
reap the rewards of.
Well, Ranger is though, and,
For
and
sure.
Mercury is, and you know, Rapala is huge. I mean, they all did. It's just,
Them non-endemics though.
yeah,
Like and yeah, I guess that's just interesting to me. It's fascinating because yeah, you've got, I mean, that's the buzz right now. If it's not forward-facing sonar, it's what's the pro circuit gonna do for blah 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 blah. And
Well,
it's fishing is
well, I mean, 200 boat tournaments though. I mean, what are these guys winning on the opens at a 200 boat tournament?
fuck. It's suicide, Dean. Unless you're Easton Fothergill, it's financial suicide.
Yeah, but I mean, I mean, is it 30 grand, 20 grand? They win for a 200 boat tournament.
50,
You got
I think, but 225, and
it's $1,000, what,
it's the hardest tournament to win. is an open.
$2,500 entry fee.
I think it's $5,000.
No, that's for the elites, isn't it?
You're probably right. I don't know exactly, but it's. I mean, you're in 56. You have to win, and you don't break even if you fish the opens.
Yeah.
If
oh,
you
I
win
mean,
an event, I feel like your season should be covered. It's that hard to win.
I
one.
mean, you just referenced Brad Leiferman back in the day when he won a couple of Shelbys back to back with 50 grand apiece. And my dad went to him. He said, Brad, I can get you a deal with Rapala. Brad says, I got a job. He worked for Honeywell. He worked a long time. And I mean, he knew that it's a tough road unless you're 100% all in. You know what I mean? You're not gonna do it. Not many guys are gonna do it. And it turned out to be a good thing for him. Guys like Seth, Seth's hit a home run.
How about it?
Well, in Austin, I mean, all these, I mean, it just proves that the Minnesota's Easton. I mean, it's a spawning ground for really good fishermen because it is a very competitive market.
Yep.
And the guys that figure it out, they catch them. I mean, they're good. Even Bob Downey. I mean, Bob Downey
could catch him.
Bob Downey was on the
Sleeper.
state team with us. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, we were down in Iowa. We didn't catch crap. But then again, I look at a trophy there where we won the South Dakota Northern Division, Francis Case, Chamberlain, South Dakota, 5-man team. We won a boat. You know what I mean? For
Jimmy was on that, right?
Yep, Jimmy was in it. Jimmy carried the load on that one.
Well, that's, I think, what's interesting with pro sports now is, like, to be a pro bass fisherman, to me, like a guy like Jimmy, for example, right? Fucking hammer. Absolute killer. I mean, could fish against anybody. But to make it in pro bass fishing, you need a YouTube channel. You need a social media account. And you can't just be good anymore, Dean.
Oh, you gotta be great.
You gotta be great, or you gotta be good and great at business and great at promotion and great at... Because if, like, let's look at Josh Douglas. Like, what he's done on the business side allows him to do it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And there's a lot of really good anglers out there. And I think what's weird about pro fishing is it's not like professional golf, professional hockey, where you might be watching the best. You're watching some of the best, but a lot of the best anglers, I don't know if they ever got a shot. You know what I mean?
Oh, yep, no doubt about it. There's guys.
And that's what's weird about fishing versus other sports.
I mean, you
is
talk about
that.
Walls and Andy Walls and
Oh yeah, Keith Tuma. I mean,
Sizik. I mean, all them guys from up there in Brainerd. There's some really, really good fishermen that could very easily make it if they had the backing or whatever.
totally.
No doubt about it. I mean, I've competed against all of them. I mean, I would have liked to have done it. I look back, and I'm there was a guy that said it, and I think it was who the heck was it? I'm not going there because I ain't gonna be able to remember his name.
You're good.
But he said it was back in the day when we were fishing like the team trail, the Bassmaster team trail, and you could go to the classic.
Yep.
Okay. It wasn't a team trail. Weekend series, individuals. Okay. And we go down there and whatever. And anyways, the guy that Jeff Coble was his name, and he had gotten older. And he finally won one of the things, and he had won a few things. And he'd been to the Classic already, but he finally got his chance where he could have ran the whole thing. They gave him an opportunity to do that, and he said, now I have the means to do it, but I don't have the wherewithal. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, back then he could fish from 12, 14 hours a day. Now he got older and he didn't have the wherewithal to do it. So I mean, it's a timing thing, and I mean I could afford to do it, but there's no way that I could possibly, run 12 tournaments, you know what I mean, be on the road for that much and fish, 12, 14 hours a day. And,
I think the best way to describe that is a tough pill. Like
Yep.
fishing comes with a tough pill of like, when you're good enough, you probably can't afford to do it.
Yep.
And when you can afford to do it, you probably don't have the same dog you had in you
Yep.
to go do it.
Yep.
And man, that's a tough pill to swallow
Yep.
as a aspiring,
Well, ain't no
pro,
different.
and it takes a little luck, man.
Ain't no different than anything else in life, though. I mean, you get to a point where you got the money to go deer hunting or elk hunting, and you can't climb the mountain. You know what I mean?
It's so true, man. And I think, well, we only got so much time, and it's just the cost involved with trying. And then the thing is if you succeed, you still might be 20 grand in credit card debt is the problem with.
Yep, could be
I think the elk, you still get some meat in the freezer, and you're probably not out 20 grand.
Yeah.
But where is it going, dude? You probably have a better crystal ball on where it's going because you've seen more of it come, and now it's starting to just happen faster. It used to be.
Well, it's just going to be a mainstream sport. It's on TV. I mean, they're streaming it live on mainstream
Right.
TV. You know, I mean, you can watch it on ESPN on Saturday morning. It's a pretty big deal, and I don't think it's going anywhere because if it was, they wouldn't keep buying the TV time. They've even bought more for next year because it's that big of a deal. People are watching it, and I mean, if you can watch 3 hours of golf, you sure as hell can watch 3 hours of fishing.
I can.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that part of fishing gets better, like the spectator aspect. It's all there to do it. If you could watch 4 different guys on 4 different plexes.
Well, I mean, I don't think
pick
it's
who you
going
watch.
anywhere in the near future. I mean,
Right.
I mean, it's just going to keep going where it is.
Seems like it's kind of in a weird spot that way.
Yeah,
but
I mean, the economy's in a state where it's hard to tell. It's got, you know, it's in a weird state right now. So I mean,
oh yeah,
and I mean, the boat dealers are sitting on inventory. I mean, everybody's sitting on inventory, and the economy's not great. So I mean, it's hard to tell where it's going, but they've planned it for next year to be similar to what this year was.
sure.
Okay, I mean, unless something changes, and I mean, you can only take it year by year. I don't in the 5-year plan. I don't know what to expect out of it, but
Well, with technology and stuff, what I'm curious about is like with this jig head minnow craze coming out, is the buzzbait going to be the next like big thing? Like something completely old school, something completely opposite? Is that going to come back, or are we just going to continue down the rabbit hole of gayer and finessier lures and stuff like that?
my brother said it a long time ago. Whatever's happening in California, that's what's going to be happening here.
It's really good.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
I mean, he talked about drop shotting years ago, and then it's, you know, I mean, Aaron Martin's was, you know, legendary in you know what I mean, with his drop shot stuff. Now everybody's doing it. He was just way ahead of his time too.
Right.
And I mean, whatever's going on down there right now, or maybe it's
Japan.
Alabama or Japan.
Japan and Cali seem to be, because you think about Japan, I think they're ahead of us simply due to
Fishing pressure.
fishing pressure and population density and just they are, yeah, that's the crystal ball. And Cali, to your point,
Well, I mean, think of the people standing in line at Lake Castaic to go fishing. I mean, they 4 hours. They wait to go fish for 4 hours, waiting in a line to go fishing.
some of that state never made sense to me, Dean.
Me neither. Right by Price, he said, me neither. Hey, quick time.
So you're saying you started Capras in '85. What'd you do before that?
Oh, fucking coyote, look at that fucker.
Oh yeah.
That was last night at 10:14, or no, 8:14. 8 o'clock last night. Fucker.
Get a lot of them
Yeah.
out here. You shoot them?
I haven't been, but I'm gonna. Fuckers.
They fuck with your deer.
Yeah. They chase them all over. I was gonna look for this thing here that I had back in the day, but what the fuck? All right, there was my Gull Lake 5-pounder.
Ooh.
Better make sure you can't see the spot. No. That was one of the ones in practice that I had. I was like, I couldn't hold them up to take a picture, but that was a fucking big one.
That's bow ties or Cinnasum.
Nope.
No?
Close to shore, believe it or not.
I like it.
Look at that. That fucker, he's in the fridge right now.
Dude, I can't believe what kind of walleye Lake Gull is now. It's crazy how good the walleye fishing is out there.
Yeah, it was pretty fucking crazy. Where was that thing? Oh, this one chick at the bar that I was at last night. She's the one that signed me up for I'm the DJ at the bar. So every time people uses their credits, you know, they buy touch tunes. Like I get like 25 credits a week that they send me to play music, and I can play it anywhere.
Hell yeah. How do you get that perk? I bartend. I
Go
want
to
a
your
DJ.
touch tunes. Mm-hmm. You get the app, okay, and then you try to become the bar rewards. It's called.
Okay.
And then you got to get the remote from the touch tune thing, and you push one button on there, and then it gives you a code, and you got to touch the screen because it's hard to figure out how to do it because it's touch screen, but you touch it and it gives you a code. You put it in your phone, and then you sign up as the DJ, and so then however many check-ins you get per, for people playing your shit, you get. I'll see how many I got this week. I can show you in here in a second. I'm just fucking wearing a.
What's your go-to bar song when you're DJing?
Oh, I like Rehab, bartender song.
Oh,
Bartender,
yeah.
I really did it this time.
Yep. Sitting on a bar on the inside.
Look at that fucker. That was last year.
Oh my God.
It's right out fucking 400 yards from here.
Well, what were you telling me that you just saw in your backyard? Like,
This was at my old house a couple of years ago. That was just down the street. That was another big one.
well, you said you watched them fighting in your backyard for what, 5-6 minutes?
It was more than that. Yeah, no, that was
Or just fighting like what, an 8-pointer and a
Big 10.
damn.
Oh, this is old school shit. I mean, from back in the...
Dude, that is. I wish I could turn that phone around right now because
That's...
Dean,
Look at that.
put your headphones on. What the? So okay,
You
now
ain't using this shit.
Now I well we ain't now we're. I have a generic question now after I just saw that. What did you do? What before you worked
We were
at
just
the
talking
store,
about touch tunes. I was in the entertainment business.
before Capra's? You
That's like
fuck Dino.
that was at the Iron Horse. I was a DJ.
You're a fucking legend, Dino. And I appreciate the time today, dude. I know you're probably you showed me that crossbow you got, and you're probably ready to unleash on some. How many tags you got to fill yet?
Oh, I haven't even been hunting yet. I've been just scouting.
Scouting.
And cameras, and I got food plots, and I was very fortunate to a couple of years ago find a piece of land that I really like, and built a house on it. And then I've been buying more, around. So I'm up to like 185 acres now,
Nice.
and food plots, and I got a John Deere tractor, and I love doing that. That's super cool. That's planting and figuring out what they like to eat. It's almost like a little fishing mission. What are they gonna bite on? And, they've got so many food plot, like stuff you can buy and seeds and stuff. And I've kind of been working on what works the best and what brings them in the book, and I'm kind of getting a little thing figured out where there's certain times of year where I know what they like. And right now, if, about 6 o'clock, they'll start piling into one of my back fields. And I mean, there'll be a bunch of deer there. And I've even had some of them, in the mornings fighting and stuff. And it's kind of super cool. So, I mean, I'm getting ready to go hunting. I was, they got this couple tournaments coming up here in the next couple days, and guys have been calling me about it. And I'm kind of just over the tournament stuff for this season. I'm not going to miss it until, spring, or I might even go down to Florida with Brad. He's got his place down there, and, he's been nice enough to let me come down and hang out with them. And, he guides down there, and he doesn't take any guide trips when I'm down there, but we'll go down there, and they've got little Sunday, like a little Wednesday night, or only it's like a Sunday, full 8-hour tournament stuff. And
Fun.
and they got some big ones down there on the Harris chain, so I might go down there and do that. But right now I'm getting ready for deer hunting, and I like it, and I've got one in mind that I'd like to get my hands around. So, but I'm waiting for just the right conditions. There's still a lot of leaves on the trees, and the deer don't seem to be like specifically going to a certain thing. So you need to have a little bit more better shot range than, you can't get them within 20 yards with all the weeds or leaves on the trees. So, I mean, I need a 40 or 50 yard deal. And, so that gives you 100 yards either side of you. So, I mean, cause they're not coming to the food plots on the trails. So,
Well, this would be a good spot to end. You were mentioning to me that I can't remember if it was Brad thought you were crazy for saying it, but killing a big deer is harder than winning a tournament. And I guess that to me is, no one's ever said that to me.
well, Go chase a big trophy buck once, and you'll understand. It's just like I said. I'm picking my time because they are so smart or lucky or whatever it is, but their senses are so intense that they can feel you. You know what I mean? Around, it's almost like the fish with the sonar. Guys are turning off their sonars because of the fishing pressure, and they're trying to be 80 feet, 100 feet away from the fish on the boulders and all that stuff going on. Well, them big deer are like that. They have a sixth sense that somehow they always elude you. And it's very, very hard. Don't get me wrong. They can walk in stupid and you shoot them like, 14-year-old kid shoots a 200-incher, but that don't happen very often. I've been hunting my whole life, and it's very, very hard to get close to a big buck unless you really plan it. And tournaments, it seems when things go right, they go right. Okay? And they seem to go more right when I'm tournament fishing than when I'm deer hunting. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Because it's hard to get a big buck within your range, under 50 yards from you. And I've shot some nice ones with guns too at 200 yards. But I'm just saying, bow hunting for a trophy buck, it's a lot harder than I think winning a tournament. Depends on the size of the tournament, obviously. But
you got me at asking another question now when you brought up guys turning off their sonar.
Oh yeah.
Is that something that you found works for you? Is that something you mess with?
I'm not that paranoid, but I had the hydrowave thing, whatever, and I don't have one now.
I don't either.
Okay, and I didn't notice that noise made them any less calm, or turning them on and off makes them any less calm. So I don't. I also believe that what you catch the most on, what color? The one you throw the most.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, some guys are all freaked out about color and freaked out about this and that. I'm not super paranoid about all that, but when it comes to deer hunting, I am. Okay, it's like I don't want to go out in the woods I don't want to spook the buck just once. Okay, because you might not ever see him again.
Yep.
And I don't know that if you spook maybe the 6-pound smallmouth, you spook him off the bed or spook him away, he's going to go away, but he's usually going to come back because that's where he lives. Okay, the deer, I don't know, they just seem to have a better sixth sense about danger.
Yep.
And that's just the way it is. And so I'm not super paranoid about all that as much as I am when I'm deer hunting.
That makes sense. I just wonder, with Tonka, the amount of pressure it gets. Does a guy turning his 2D off as he flips through?
There's guys though that's
you can overthink it all.
They call it the boat pattern. They go to where it's busiest in fish.
Well, that's yeah.
I've heard that story
The prop
too.
wash trick is you throw closer to the prop to catch a bass that's going by at 20 miles an hour. Tonka's the only place where I'm like, fuck it. If it doesn't make sense, it probably works pretty good.
Yeah, no, that's all that stuff is. It's too much speculation for me. You know what I mean? I go with what I know, and I don't worry about it. The sonar thing. I know some guys do.
Totally. Well, I just want you to know I feel like I could record a week's worth of these with you, and I guess for me, I just always looked up to you, Dean, and sharing kind of your story and that history with putting that into the stratosphere, into the galaxy, to me is something that is important to me because the sport's changing fast, and we can't forget the pioneers who helped build it. So thank you for all of that.
Well, no, that's I'm glad I could do it, and hopefully we'll do it again. And I'll see you on the water.
Hell yeah. Teal's Bass Galaxy, checking in, checking out.